Yeah. Elilizwe lokhokho bethu. Elilizwe labantu abamnyama. Elilizwe mama yo. Elilizwe labantu abamnyama. Elilizwe mama yo. Elilizwe labantu abamnyama. Elilizwe lokhokho bethu. Elilizwe le sizaba. Elilizwe lokhokho bethu. Elilizwe labantu abamnyama. Hayibo, hayibo, hayibo. Sizaba. Elilizwe. Sizaba la selilizwe. 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 Joe. Amanga. Amanga. Gawethu. Gawethu. Amanga. Amanga. Gawethu. Gawethu. I thought we should start this particular event differently because it is Youth Day. Umfutho wolutsha must be felt. And I'd like to thank you all for being here today. Today we gather on this 40th and 47th anniversary of the 16th of June 1976 student uprising which started in Soweto. And we are gathered here in the spirit of nothing for us without us, right? So we are here to have a robust engagement discussing the complexities of what it is to exist as a young person in South Africa. I'm not going to do someone else's job and welcome you officially. Instead, I am going to call on Professor Mngomezulu to open up this engagement and welcome us officially.
Molweni, ni right. Hey, I was a little bit worried. Umanga buntlaks eqala leculo and then I saw youngsters sitting down. Ngoba thina during our times, yabona into ethoyi sasishaya indaba ukudlala. But yeah, things change. We now have load shedding, which we didn't have during our times. So thina si youth endala. So we look at things differently. I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to do a lot of things which I had planned to do. I'll just cut to the chase. Ngiyazi-ke ukuthi khona abantu abasijoyina virtually, so and they've been waiting for us. Unfortunately, kube nama-slight delays. So I'll just do the formalities. As I said, mina angiseyona youth mina. So I'm not going to do much of the talking. This is your day. Tina were just spectators and listeners. So inini enizokwenza the real job. Program director, Ms. Lakanepo Mahlangu, speaker, Ms. Benyon, respondent, Ukamani Sinefu, panel led by the SRC president. President not national president. And I had a chat with this president and he promised me, Uguti, I am shocked. He promised me, I am shocked when things go wrong. He's hands-on, so he is going to address you at some point. Guests and attendees, both those who are joining us virtually, and then of course all of you who have come to attend this event in person. Today I feel very young, and the reason is very simple. It's because we are celebrating Youth Day. And of course, as you would know, 2023 marks the 47th anniversary of the June 16 student uprising. We started in Soweto, as Nhlakanipho was saying, but then of course spread in other parts of the country, albeit in different magnitude. Siyazi ukuthi the core event happened in Soweto, but Soweto was not the only place that was affected by the June 16 uprising. Let me begin by acknowledging the CANRAD staff, that is Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, which is led by Ms. Buiswa Scott. Where is Ms. Scott? Oh, she's outside. Led by Ms. Buiswa Scott, and then of course Mr. Rodney Buzard. There is someone who call him Pusagwe. That is Uncle Rodney. That is the team that has worked tirelessly to make sure that this event becomes a success. And in the same vein, I would also like to acknowledge colleagues who have joined hands with us in making this event a success. And here I would like to thank the International Office, which was represented by Ms. Anele Mngadi, the youthful Anele Mngadi. Anele, where are you? Where is Anele? It was represented by the youthful Anele Mngadi, and then of course the Faculty of Humanities, especially the Department of Political Science and History, led by Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, as well as the youth from the Development Studies Society. These are the people who made this day a success. We carefully coined the theme of today's discussion as follows: challenges faced by the youth today and the role the youth can play to resolve them. That is the theme of this particular event. And we did this deliberately because we were informed by a number of things that have been happening. Like, for example, we know that the youth says you cannot come up with changes in this continent while leaving the youth outside. If you are solving youth challenges, you must make sure that the youth is involved. As the saying goes, nothing about us without us. Second, dwelling in the past to praise heroes and heroines of the 1970s is not going to take this continent of ours forward. Therefore, as much as it is important for us to reflect on the past, but we also have to consider our current circumstances. Otherwise, we will be stuck in the past and then won't be able to address the challenges that we face as the youth today. Moreover, we derived inspiration from the words of Frantz Fanon, who once said the following, and I quote, "Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill or betray it in relative opacity," and end of quote. Basically meaning that each and every generation must discover what its challenges are and then address those challenges. And then if they fail, they must fail having started to try and address them, not to give the responsibility to other people. There are a number of challenges that we're currently faced with. Among them are the following. I've listed just a few. The first one, of course, is crime. Crime statistics is going up each and every day, as you might have heard in the recent statistics. And then, of course, intermittent political squabbles among political parties, where politicians are fighting one another and even killing one another. We have a number of diseases and infections, including COVID-19, which just ended. And then, of course, lack of service delivery, which we are complaining about. Poverty, which is ravaging the country. And exclusion of the youth from leadership positions by those people who want to die in office, and then not giving the youth a chance to lead this continent. Therefore, it would not make sense to relive the experiences of the 1970s without considering what we are faced with currently. We know that historically, the youth in the past has tried to address some of the issues they were faced with at the time. For example, in East Africa, the youth in East Africa was not happy about the fact that the colonial government was sending them abroad in designated institutions to try and make them docile. Some institutions abroad, ukuze bakwazi ukuthi bacontroleke. Not any other institution, but certain institutions with a clear agenda to control them. And the youth in East Africa said, we cannot tolerate this. We want to go to the institutions of our choice. When they went to those institutions abroad, they came back politicized, and those are the people who changed our continent, including the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Nyerere, and many others. So they learned from outside, and they brought the skills inside. And then what the government then did was to try and establish university colleges within Africa so that they could contain this youth bangabesaya abroad. Unfortunately for them, the youth of East Africa touched base with an institution in Alabama, USA, called Tuskegee Institute. That is where they were politicized, and when they came back, they challenged the government of the day, and they said, we cannot tolerate this. As I come towards the end, Clarks, in South Africa, between 2015 and 2016, we had a movement called Roads Must Fall and Fees Must Fall. And these movements demonstrated to us that even today, the youth has an ability to change the status quo, which is why we are here and we are the future of this continent. So when we planned this event, then we had 4 objectives in mind. The first one is to urge the youth to be mindful of the challenges they are faced with today. 1976, Sarafina, which my brother was playing there. Let's look at our issues now. Secondly, to remind them about the historic context of these challenges. These challenges, they are not new. Some of them have a history. So we have to know that history as well. And then the last part one, to afford the youth the opportunity to deliberate about these challenges. So what those challenges are, we then have to deliberate about them and then find a way forward, which is the last one, to provide them a platform to propose possible solutions as a collective. In other words, we have come together here a direction which you must take, we as the adults, and then we have to follow you, not the other way around. With these few words, I would like to thank all the speakers for accepting our invitation, and then of course all of you for coming here. Happy Youth Day to all of you. Ngiyabonga, enkosi, ndalibuwa, paya danke, asante sana.
Good afternoon, comrades. So I have a very simple task here today, and we have the honor of having 2 very skilled speakers and very knowledgeable people who are going to be addressing us as the youth. So the first one that I'm going to call upon is Ms. Sam Bainon. And Usam was born in Gqeberha but raised in a small rural farming community outside of Makhanda in the Eastern Cape. She acquired a Bachelor of Arts degree, majoring in political science and public administration, and she also has a Bachelor of Arts honors degree in political science at the Nelson Mandela University. At Nelson Mandela University, Sam served as a Secretary General and Deputy President of the Students' Representative Council, and was the only woman SRC Exco member in both her terms in office. She also formed part of a broader student collective at the university and in the province that went to coordinate the Fees Must Fall movement, which saw the mass mobilization and conscientization of students across the country in the fight for free decolonial education for the poor and working class students. She is a recipient of the Nelson Mandela University's Vice Chancellor's Awards for Excellence in Leadership and the Abe Bailey Travel Bursary. She has served as a local government councillor and as a public official in local and provincial spheres of government across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Sam Bainon. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hi, Molweni. Ninjani, how are you? Yo, that Ndiapila sound very pop, but asko up. The issues are many. I first want to thank, I've done so many, I've been a part of so many public dialogues, but I still get nervous. But I first just want to say thank you so much to the comrades. I don't mean that in ANC terms, but in brother and sister arm terms, for inviting me and to just engage everyone here today. I also want to just commend the young people that I see in the room, not just students of higher learning, academics, researchers, and so on, but the high school scholars. Can Can you just raise your hand if you are in primary or high school? I'm not quite sure. So these are, I'm a 2000, ne? Okay. Can you give yourselves a clap, man? I want to acknowledge you because, and this is by no means a criticism of us as young people, but it's very rare to see a 15 or 16-year-old participating in critical discussions around issues pertaining to youth. We can talk a little bit about that later on, I guess, during the discussion part of the program. But it's just, yeah, it's very inspiring. So please keep it up. Just to give a side note remark, now you wouldn't think so, for obvious reasons. But yeah, nhlala no +1 ekasi ezwide F4 plus. And is there anyone from F4 plus here? Ah, guys, I must mobilize. Okay. But yeah, it's just waking up this morning and leaving home to see what some of our youth were up to at 8, 9 XN already this morning. Goopy man, goopy guys. But let's get into it. I've been asked to talk about two things. One, challenges facing young people. It's difficult because I think as young people we know just waking up every day, what are the challenges we face. But I first wanted to, and forgive me, I am quite blunt in my approach when speaking. So I also want to say there are going to be some harsh statements I make, but I'm always open to discussion and debate and so on. But I think the first fundamental challenge that came to mind when applying my mind and thinking about all of this was the negotiation that took place in '94 and the deal that came out and emanated from those negotiations. So I first want to just acknowledge as well, as a young white South African, that of course a lot of the issues that we currently face today do emanate from history. We have to acknowledge the role history, which was quite oppressive and violent in nature, when we think about colonialism, we think about apartheid and the impact it still has today on young people, in particular young. It's a sabotage, this one, but it's fine. In particular, young Black African youth, right? So I acknowledge fully history, right, and its role, but I started off with '94. I think as young people, we need to ask ourselves if the deal negotiated in that year has served the majority of South Africans today. And I mean this with respect to the ownership of umhlaba, so land, the land question. I speak about this with respect to ownership of mineral resources. And I also just speak about this with respect to law. And while, yes, it can be argued that we've made progress around some of the legislation we have today, and by no means do I want to dismiss the hard-earned freedoms fought for, and some people even sacrificed their lives for, to get to the place of '94. But at the same time, just as someone who works in the public sector, someone who deals with laws on a day-to-day basis, someone who understands how politicians meet across party political lines. So I'm not just talking about the ANC, right? Across party political lines, how politicians meet in council meetings, in local government sphere, right? How they meet in provincial legislatures, how they meet in parliament to do what? Discuss laws, pass laws, to pass what else? Budgets, right? And how those budgets are meant to go to particular services and departments. Just how that works, that process in and of itself, so the institutions, the legislative institutions, and the laws that we still have today, whether they really work for us as people, but in particular young people who, of course, we make up the majority of citizens in the country. And I say that for this reason. If you think about your local municipality, right? How many young people here participate in the budget and IDP process every year? Do we know what is an IDP? Must call it up. Okay, you are a comrade, you should know, okay? So an IDP for the younger folk, it's an integrated development plan. So all the councillors that we have in the city or in a town or in a metro, they come together every year and they say, okay, we've got this amount of money and we want to plan this amount of money according to this department and in this way. So let's say we have 50 million. Okay, let's meet with the community. Community, abahlali, how do you want this 50 million to be utilized? No, I want roads. No, I want my clinic to work and function better. No, I want this. I want the street lights to be fixed. No, I want this, right? But let me tell you something. The law in South Africa today says that only must happen, that consultation. Yeah? The politicians only need to consult with us, ordinary people, once a year. Once a year. The IDP process is once a year. The budget process is once a year. So if you miss that meeting, Mhlambu Fear Plus and the councillor Uceba has called us to the community hall. As young people, if we are not mobilized and participate in that process, Uceba will decide, that 50 million, it's going like this, A, B, C, D. And the whole of Fear Plus is then, I'm not attacking my Ceba Luzuko from Fear Plus, comrades of SASCO, but I'm using it as an example that when we don't participate in these legislative processes and houses, it actually works against us because the law hasn't been transformed in a way that says, actually, no, we want public reps to engage with members of the public every month. Why? Because we're still dealing with law not even from 94, pre-94 at times, You know, for example, in Parliament where you see the speaker walk down the line and then there's this guy carrying this European kind of tool. You need to think a bit more critically about why is that? Why do we still have proceedings and legislation that's carried out in a very Eurocentric way? And that also speaks to how we participate as young people in these processes. Is public participation really public participation? Or is it just a tick box exercise? No, I'm a councillor. I did meet with my community last month. I'll see them again next year. Or I'll see them at elections. So that's one of the challenges that, really stuck out for me. Number two, guys, it's obvious, youth unemployment. Youth unemployment. We can talk about entrepreneurship and how we need to not only become employees, but perhaps become entrepreneurs, build and develop businesses that can empower other youth. That's true. We must talk about it. We must talk about how do we equip young people both from school level, so primary and high school, into university, into TVET colleges. We must talk about that. But just unemployment, the question of unemployment in and of itself. Let me give us some stats, right? 25 to 34-year-olds. Well, let's start with 15 to 24-year-olds, okay? Hey, it's tough. I get pained, I don't just believe in being an academic and a critical thinker. There's a human element of this. It's painful. It's painful to know that 3.7 million people today are NEET. Do we know what NEET is? So NEET stands for not in employment, education, or training. So you're not at school, you're not in an institution of higher learning, you're not working, you are not getting some kind of training to even hustle like MT, the hustler. No? There's nothing happening. Dololo, uvuka, you just wake up, you sit, Maybe you sit a little bit, you get up to some nonsense, you come back home, the cycle continues the next day. You are neat. You are not in any category. No education, no training, no employment. Hleli. We've got almost 4 million young people doing that every day. Okay? Then we have a whole lot of other youth who are in education and who have graduated, maybe, because we also have a high rate of young people who start school but who do not complete school, right? So maybe baphuma bane grade 10 mhlambi, ne? Not even matric. So we've got that high rate of young people who don't have matric. We have that high rate of young people who don't have any form of higher education. But we also have graduates and graduates to be, molweni, who are sitting at home. So we have a graduate unemployment rate of 10.6%. So that's young people who have actually graduated. They've managed to fight the system, right? An untransformed, racist, patriarchal system. And they've managed to graduate. And they've gone to the graduation ceremony. They've taken the pictures. They've had that awesome moment. But they are sitting at home, right? And there's so many other stats that I can go through. Right now, young black South Africans, 38% of you are unemployed. And black African women in particular, because there is the question of gender and gender disparity, the rate is even higher. I don't actually even want to say it because it's painful. But it's even higher than just the black African youth unemployment rate, right? So there's the question of race and the question of gender as well. Number two, we have a skills mismatch. So the reason why a lot of graduates sit at home is because in as much as you have a qualification, the economy that we have cannot absorb you into the market. You don't have the skills or the skill set required to take on the jobs that are available in the market. Number three, I'm going quickly because I have to keep in time. I also want to quickly talk about representation and power. So yes, we have seen some progress, some positive news, whereby we see some more young people in councils, we see some more young people represented in legislatures, in parliament even. But the question I want to pose here today is, do those young people occupy positions of authority and power? So it's not enough for us to say, this party and that party deployed 6 young people. When we know that those 6 young people, when they go to a caucus meeting of the party that deployed them, are totally silent because they don't have any form of power or influence or persuasion, any kind of weight to carry in those meetings. So it's basically also a tick box kind of exercise. So that's something sadly to think about, that yes, representation is important, but representation cannot be the be and end all of everything. We actually need to have young people occupying positions of influence and what we call executive authority, which means they take the decisions, they sign off the decisions, they implement the decisions for who? For the young people, for us, okay? I think I have a few minutes left. There's so many other problems I can talk about, guys. We face issues of crime. We face issues of substance abuse. We drink as young people. We drink. It's true, I guess. We drink. We drink. We smoke. Yeah, I'm not going to say what, Prof. But we smoke, you know. There's so many. We have teachers who are impregnating our young sister learners. we have young people who are so desperate for a job that they are willing to pay a bribe or even sleep with their employer in order to access a job. There are so many problems that I don't need to theorize and come from a scientific research perspective, but just be very practical about reality. But I think the second part of the question in closing is about what do we do then as young people? Great, that's more than enough. What do we do? I think for me, the first thing, young people, we need to conquer the self. So before, as a young person, you can lead other young people, you must lead yourself. You cannot find yourself in a situation as a young person, whereby you occupy a position of power, influence, that you then use to abuse and exploit other young people. It means that when, as a young person, you haven't conquered the self. You haven't acquired the ethical capacity you need, the discipline, the type of discipline you need in order to lead other people. So conquer the self. Number two, if you have managed to acquire some form of position, whether it's a job or start a business, be a revolutionary in that field. Sometimes we are revolutionary, ne? And then once Tina, as the individual, we've attained something, we forget the revolution. But the revolution is still continuing. It's not an event, it's a journey, right? It means that once I've managed to get to parliament, the only agenda I must have in parliament is representing issues of young people. It's not, okay, now I'm no Ramaphosa, Ram. The right him, the It's, hey, I'm next to Ram. I need to talk about that NYDA and what's happening there. I need to talk about education policies for young people. I need to talk about the missing middle in institutions of higher learning. I need to talk about why Fort Hay is collapsing. A, B, C, D, okay? Lastly, my last point is that is as an individual. In closing, as a collective, young people, we need to learn how to mass mobilize. And we need to develop our political consciousness. I'm not talking about partisan politics. You have a constitutional right to join and engage in whichever party you want to. I'm talking about broader social and political consciousness of issues of young people in communities. Educate ourselves about those and create some of these solutions, right? And lastly, next year is a 1994 moment. We are heading towards that stage. I know some of my green, black, and gold counterparts, they might differ with me, it's okay. But next year is a very important moment for young people. If you haven't registered to go and vote, you are a problem. I'm making that statement. You are a problem. And I'm encouraging you to please go and register. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. I know that's not my role. My role is to say it is one of the solutions, not the only, it is one of the solutions. To say here is a ballot box, it's a mechanism, it's a tool to hold people who are in power accountable, and to change it if you are not happy. And to change it again if the new ones who come in let you down, and again and again. We've seen how young people in countries across the African continent have done it and are starting to do it. They're starting to say, government, we've given you a chance. Things are not happening the way we see fit. We'll put you back in another 5 years if the opposition has let us down, and so on. Yeah, God. So I'm not saying who and what. All I'm saying is use that tool. That's what I'm trying to say. And if you're comfortable with the current status quo, you can still use the tool. You can still use the tool next year. Thank you. I'm going to leave it at that, and then we'll discuss during the dialogue phase. Ngiyabonga.
No, thank you very much, Sam. So, I'm now going to call upon the respondent, and he asked me very nicely not to list his long list of credentials. He said I must only name 2. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to comply. So the respondent for our speech today is Ukamani Snefu. And Ukamani said, I must say, he's a LLM candidate at Nelson Mandela University, and he is a South African Youth Council Eastern Cape PEC member. Thank you very much. Comrade Snefu.
I can't hold this. Was director of Conrad, the staff of Conrad, the staff of Conrad is greeted. Let me greet the young people of the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan Municipality. Let me greet the students of Nelson Mandela University from all political fronts and non-political fronts. Let me greet also the former staff that I used to work with at Conrad that is gracing us with their presence today. But above all, let me greet everyone who has happened to be present in this seminar and those who are streaming from afar. Also, let me acknowledge Samantha Kakamba Painon for the foundation she has laid for us in this discussion today. And also thank her for keeping to the time, because I would not respect anyone who tells me about time. I would speak and I would not be told about time. I just want to tell whoever organized this that I will not keep to the time. I will be very short. Well, either by the barrel or by the bullet, by the Bible or by the gun, any which way, freedom must come. From Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar, one Africa, one currency. It has been postponed for a long time, and one of our problems that we sink as the West swing or the East frowns to the West, Africa must then adapt, must choose a side, and that's where our problems start. Well, I think, therefore I am. This is an old Latin saying by René Descartes, a French philosopher, and Africa has ceased to think, and I submit that one of the reasons that we don't think is because the West and the East decide what must happen. And the youth of South Africa prefer to dance, drink, have sex, and not work. Well, in response, Sam, I think my introduction to my talk or response today is clear that the young people of South Africa, everyone in this room and elsewhere in our country, is the biggest enemy to themselves. There is no old person who's attacking a young person. Young people are just playing into the hands of old people. And we contribute day by day to our own demise as young people of South Africa. It's not because that there is a concerted effort either by old people to attack young people. It's us who are actually doing nothing, and by doing nothing, we are actually opposing ourselves. That would be the theme of my response. Well, I am accused to be a Marxist, and today I charge from Marx, and I quote, "It is not the consciousness of man that determines their being, but on the contrary, it is their social being that determines their consciousness." I just spoke to my friend Ati. Pangusha is there. And I said to him, you can wash a pig. Wash it, all you can. And it will be clean. But if you are going to take that pig back into the sty, the pig will be dirty. So I can educate all of you here. But if I'm going to bring you back to where you come from, nothing will change. Because our problems are not only based on our consciousness only, but our conditions, I argue. And Sam has done justice to me in the response and formulated her points in that her history and her understanding of South Africa begins in 1994 for the purposes only of this discussion. And I'll keep it at that. What exactly young people have done since 1994? I think of Fees Must Fall. That is notable. Think of Roads Must Fall. Roads, by the way, is still there. He has not fallen. Still there. Most of people who are funded are still funded by roads. By the way, the African National Congress has done injustice to roads legacy. When I said from Cape to Cairo, that was the vision of roads. That Africa must be interconnected in terms of commerce, in terms of trade, and also in terms of politics. What the African National Congress has failed, plausibly, is that they have disconnected the continent. There is no trade, free trade, from Cape to Cairo. I can ask all of you here, who has taken a train? And there's no one under 35 who has taken a train only for trade purposes. All of you have done it for recreational purposes. And there's no trade in Africa. And I respond, Sam, in that way that the biggest challenge in Africa for young people is that trade has been tarnished. It has been killed. I do not trade with an African because I see a Nigerian as a person who will sell me drugs, who will prostitute my sister, and a person who will come into my country without any recognition. That's my first point. That trade has been killed, intentionally or unintentionally, by the powers that be. From when we got independence, Morocco and Ghana in the 1950s, and the following countries, Tanzania and so on in the 1960s, and the young democracy that we have in South Africa in 1994, we have killed trade. And young people have allowed it. And the only thing we see from other Africans is that this person is going to kill my country because it's a notion psychopathologically that has been implanted on us. That when you see another African in Africa, in their own land, they are coming here to deplete our resources, to prostitute us, and to drug us. That's the first thing. No one has a good story to tell about Obasanjo. No one has a good story to tell about Kenneth Kaunda or Robert Mugabe. So that's how I start to respond. I respond also to say that Sam is correct when she argues that the problem in our country is the law. I happen to be educated in this institution, but I've never been taught anything about African law in this institution. And I've never been taught about the role of young people in the law in this institution. A quick search for those who, there's a Wi-Fi, by the way, in this. It's a council chamber. Yeah, that's where the powers that be in this university decide everything. Just do a quick search. Is there in the Act 108 of 1996, which is the Constitution, a reference to youth? There's none. Do a quick search. I challenge you. You will respond. Search in the Act 108 of 1996, which is the Constitution of this country. Is there any reference either in the main body of the Constitution or in the tables? There's nothing. This country does not take young people serious because its constitution does not refer or think about young people. The only reference to young people, unfortunately, Sam, in this country, is when it defines young people or what a child is. And it refers to it not only as a miniature thing in a table. It's not a subsection, it's not a paragraph, it's only a table under section 37, which is the state of emergence. So we must think about young people when we are under a state of emergence only. In response, I argue that young people will never be taken serious in this country because even the founding document of our democracy does not recognize young people. There's no reference to you, unfortunately, Serafinas. There's no reference to you in our founding document, which is the Supreme Constitution. So if you are not in the Constitution, who are you? We'll only find you at conk, unfortunately, or finesse. That's where you will be. And I further argue that perhaps the challenge that face young people is that they are not existing in terms of the law of our country. There is no law either at a national level, a provincial level, or at bylaw, which is municipal level, that speaks about young people. Young people are just something that is a picture taken there that will deal with them at a later stage. On Wednesday, which is 2 days ago, I posted on my WhatsApp, those who are privileged to be on my WhatsApp. And I said that perhaps the biggest problem we have is that those who decide on behalf of us are old, dealing with challenges. An average to a person who has done humanities is when you take and tally up every other number, divided by what you have tallied up, whatever you get, there is an average. An average is a total of something divided by what you used to total it. The cabinet of Sarah Ramaphosa's age average is 61 years old. The retirement age in South Africa is 55. From 55, you can retire in our country. So the average of people who decide what must happen executively, I don't want to use executive. Use it very well, Sam. And said executively, in our country, our future is decided by people who are pensioners. And the only person who is deemed to be young is Ronald Lamola. He's not young as well. He's turning 39 or 40 this year. Not keeping tabs on him. But he's also cited in an article by IOL that he's the youngest or a more appealing young person is Ronald Lamola. And he has failed to bring back the Guptas, and he has done other things. So he's not a model as well. Even the best case that he's dealing with, he's found wanting. I read his papers. He could not answer. By the way, Katz should have won that case, but we're not there. The third problem that you have is that we have allowed old people to tell us that the revolution or the political settlement of 1994 is final. You see, time. We have, no, I will accept your request. We have agreed that young old people should tell us that after 1994 the revolution is complete, and we have allowed them to depoliticize, not along party lines as Sam has said, but our consciousness. We no longer are politically engaged as the young people of South Africa, and that's, in my submission in response, one of the problems that we have. How do we then re-politicize ourselves and make sure that young people are engaged? For crying out loud, I was a student here. The dean of students, the vice chancellor, have what you call a moratorium on any student activities, that you cannot engage, you cannot strike, you can't do anything. There's a rule NISA which was uncontested. Where's the SRC president? He's failing students by not contesting that order, saying that students of the university cannot strike, cannot assembly, cannot demonstrate. It's an indictment on you, SRC president, to contest and rescind that order. Set it aside, because no students are going to be told by old people who are sick and old and frail, by the way, who are thinking how are they going to live beyond 24 hours so that they see tomorrow, that they cannot demonstrate. The breakthrough of 2017, I argue, Baker, of free or free fee or higher education, whatever Zuma declared on the eve of Nasrec, is not enough. There are pertinent issues that must also accompany the discussion of free higher education in South Africa. There is the content which must start at early childhood development art. That must also accompany the discussion of free education. Why did we stop having knitting classes and sewing classes? Why did we stop having artisanry skills at basic education level? Why do we have to stop home economics? Because we have wives and husbands who can't work, who can't do anything at home. The only thing that they do is they press a computer at home and their machines. And for crying out loud, artificial intelligence is going to take your jobs. So that's our problem. Two solutions. The first solution that I think we should have, Sam, in our country, we must have a renegotiation. Must have a new CODESA with new sunset clauses. You must make sure that when we do that, we are not going to do it on racial lines. We are going to do it as South Africans. There's this belief that now there's white person there, Indian person there. That's history, I submit. We must do it as young people, as we do it when we put savannah in our heads and dance and TikTok, all of those things. We must do it along those lines, not along party lines. Let it not be a conversation of DA youth, NC Youth League, if EFF Student Command, PIKE or PASMA. It must be a discussion of young people of South Africa, and it must not be convened by any political party. This thing must be done by young people, because we must define. It's a cliche, and I don't like Fanon, because it's also bringing about colonial solutions. I argued this elsewhere. We must do it on our own quiz. We must not ask the administration of Ramaphosa to do it for us. It's high time that we meet as young people and have our own negotiation. Where do we want to take this country? What must inform the agenda of that meeting? The economy must be the central question. The young people who are in that CODESA must discuss the economy of this country. Not along the patterns of historical ownership of the means of production or anything, but what do you want of this country? We're told that coal and everything is wrong, but everyone else in the world is buying from us. Same coal. We're told also that biodegradable products are not useful, but everyone is buying from us. We are told also about our country that arts, humanities are irrelevant, but everyone else is coming to UCT and UP to start African literature and African things. We can't stop those things. They say that, no, why do we have a BA? A BA is useful because it analyzes society in general. Does not stick to a formula of Pythagoras. It informs what must happen in our country and analyzes the social ills that Bill Gates does not want us to analyze. That's what must form the agenda. 2, we must discuss about this thing of language and polarization of our country. We have been divided by language for a very long time. And it continues to happen. Elsewhere, first world countries agree that we are going to speak Arabic, we are going to speak English, we are going to speak Portuguese, we are going to speak this. The reason why a person fails English is because they were only introduced to it because of a first additional language requirement in the syllabi. Not because we know that the commercial language in our country is English. Let's adopt English, and everyone, if needs be, when they are born, we say, welcome baby, you're born. They must first hear English because it controls our commerce, it controls our trade and our interaction with the rest of the world. No one speaks Xhosa to a Chinese. We must accept reality. So language should also form part of the agenda. Number 3, culture. Our culture must be single in this country. We can't have multiple cultures. For you, I'm not going to be happy with that. Our culture must be single. Let's adopt a single culture. This multicultural thing must be only in appreciation, Sam. But in reality, everyone must move in unison. If we say that this is the new South African culture, we agree on that culture, and all families, all communities, all provinces, which I disagree with the provinces, this must deal with provinces, they must move away. I don't like provinces. They are regional and tribal and backward. We must agree on a national agenda as I land. If we say that this is what South Africa is agreeing on, it should be adopted as a constitutional prerogative that everyone is going to pursue. I would have, if I had time, and this man, half man, was not on top of me, responded. Perhaps from the questions, I would answer other things, but I just want us to think and ponder around this thing that are we not our biggest enemy? And if we agree on that we are our biggest enemy, are we not the only people that we have been waiting for? And who can deliver us to where we want to go? Mantla.
Can I ask all of our panelists to please come up? I can be your Q&A, my comrade. Yes. Can our panelists please come up? Molen, my comrade, I can feel that he gathering your lucha. Iyavakala, inezingqi zolutsha. Ndiyacela ke, this is our panel discussion, our round table. We have called student leaders to come here and engage before we open up the floor. So I'm going to ask that we please give our student leaders time to reflect as well. Before we do that, Baker has the honor. Okay, Baker is denouncing the honor he was given. We're going to ask the speakers who have been asked to reflect somewhat on the conversation that has just been had, to in their reflections include a brief introduction of themselves, We're giving you 5 minutes each, leaders. Comrade Snefu has been very ill-disciplined with the time. And unfortunately, the pressure is now on you to keep us on our program. Because this is a gathering of students, I will ask the SRC president to go first. And perhaps add into your reflections some of the considerations that you feel are relevant for the higher education space and the space particularly that your students find themselves in.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone within the room itself. Greetings to the director of CANRAD, the staff of CANRAD, fellow Democrats, fellow students, nabantwana abancinci base-NMP. I greet you all. My name is Umncedi Ukhwezilomso wakaMathambeka. I'm the SRC president of Nelson Mandela University for the year 2023, meaning that I welcome you to my university. I'm a PE boy, born, raised, battered as Mxhosa walapha eBhayi, coming from the dusty streets of Idwesi, for those ones that know it, you know. Thank you so much, Sam, for paving and putting the building blocks to our discussion. You know, it's very fruitful, it was very robust as well. Thank you to the respondent, Kaman Snefu, for the lengthy response, you know. It was one that was challenges the mind and makes us think as young people. And I think that's one of the things that lacks amongst youth of, let's call it 2023. We are a youth clearly that no longer thinks and wants to challenge, you know. But how do we even get to a point where we are young people that are living on a day-to-day basis without thinking about what happens with what we do today? You know, the things that we do today, they guide and they create what happens tomorrow. You know, and we need to understand that thing, that there's life outside these cell phones of ours. There's TikTok and dance challenges and so on and so forth. You know, in South Africa currently, 80% of 10-year-olds cannot read for meaning. What does that say to you? It means that 80% of our 10-year-olds are functioning illiterates. They cannot read to understand. And perhaps gets what our respondent was talking about when he says that we need to accept that English is how the country itself is going to move forward, and it's something that we need to accept. Ukhuliswa ngesiXhosa, wazi isiXhosa, xa ufika esikolweni, you are being pushed to understand English and read in English, and that's where the illiteracy part comes in as well. However, we need to also note that the education sector itself, basic education and higher education sector as well, are poor. Because currently over 1 million students, young children, are still using pit latrines. The infrastructure in their schools is dilapidated and it's finished as well. People don't have any way to school as well. And this is where our problems really start as young people of this country. But Nati, we're not doing anything to challenge it as well. We need more thinking spaces as young people. We need to challenge the status quo as young people as well. Spaces of university is where these conversations are supposed to be happening. They say university spaces are a microcosm of society. But we need to view university spaces as what we ought or want society to be like as well. We need to discuss, challenge as young people. We remove the party lines and we speak as South Africans, young people that want a good vision. And I'm sure Nathi siyafuna ukukhulisa bethu abantwana as well as young people. But what kind of South Africa do we want to raise as insanana zethu as well? You know? So we need to have these robust conversations as young people in universities, like we did during Fees Must Fall, and so on and so forth, right? So we need to have these thorough, and it is my duty as well as the #1 student of this university to ensure that these discussions happen as well, you know, alongside with Conrad and so on and so forth. Yeah. But I think that's where I'll leave it off. Thank you so much.
Adelaide, we heard Kamani speaking about the lack of African trade. And as you reflect, I want you to speak a little bit about that and include it in your reflections and what we can do to challenge that as young people.
Thank you so much. I am Adelaide Karomo. I am a Zimbabwean national. I've been in South Africa for over 10 years. I have spent my entire adult life in South Africa. So I consider South Africa home, even though I don't always feel like I'm at home. And I'm welcomed here, despite whatever contributions I may make. I work for the university's transformation office, and I am a PhD candidate also within the institution. So my focus will be on xenophobia/Afrophobia, and this is sparked by the remarks that the respondent has given us. Generally, in the South African context, xenophobia/Afrophobia is predominantly black-on-black violence. And this is the context that I will base my remarks on. The term xenophobia/Afrophobia is problematic because it not only this is not only because it does not fully capture the extent of this phenomenon, but also because it tends to conceal the exact root cause. This therefore has the effect of, for instance, formulating ill-conceived solutions for this problem, such as the over-popularization of human rights and the focus on a tolerance-based mindset amongst so-called perpetrators. And this has a dehumanizing ripple effect because it creates this underlying assumption that black people in South Africa are intolerant human beings. They're intolerant of other human beings, and further perpetuates the discrediting racial stereotypical norms that non-Western people are barbarians and savages. If black Africans are indeed animal-like, as has been brought up, wouldn't the victims of xenophobia/Afrophobia be all racial groups and not just black Africans? Black-on-black violence in South Africa is triggered by the economic hierarchy of power, and this works in tandem with racism to place black people at the bottom end of the continuum. And this hierarchy of power is a product of global capitalist system, that the power structures of coloniality, which divided the continent's population in terms of those who are entitled to benefit from this system and those who are to be exploited, marginalized, and excluded. And we see this in terms of how we view trade, as our respondent has mentioned. Since race and racism serves as an organizing principle of the principle of global coloniality, it therefore should not come as a surprise that black people are predominantly found in spaces of abject poverty. In South Africa, incidences of xenophobia/Afrophobia take place in spatial historical temporates that have been characterized as the zones of non-being. And these are zones where we find rampant poverty, poor service delivery, overcrowding, and competition for scarce resources and jobs, as we've already heard. And these conditions are therefore the breeding ground of the survival of the fittest concept, where we find ourselves as young people. Thus, the vulnerable are bound to suffer in this context. Coloniality makes it inevitable for people to live in this zone of non-being, to survive by perpetuating violence against each other. So not only do we see xenophobia as a form of violence, we then see a big one, GBV, femicide, within those spaces. In the words of former President Thabo Mbeki, South Africa can be described as two nations in one country, one black and one white. In terms of the black nation, it is the epitome of poverty, whilst the white nation is one of affluence. All of which are experiences that make incidences of xenophobia / Afrophobia common amongst black communities. In high density suburbs especially, townships, your locations, informal settlements such as Alexandra Township, as opposed to low density suburbs where the affluent live, like Sandton. Coloniality of knowledge is indeed fueling xenophobic and Afrophobic attacks against black immigrants in South Africa, because it has normalized the direction of anger towards black Africans from the continent, as opposed to, for instance, white immigrants whose history of oppressing black people in South Africa is quite well known. But we must remember a key thing. A white immigrant in South Africa is an investor, and black immigrants are job and opportunity stealers. Xenophobia and Afrophobia can be seen as manifesting itself as a special form of racism. For instance, attackers now, more than ever, do not concern themselves with the legal status of black Africans to determine whether they, for instance, have valid identity documents, visas, and permits, and so forth. Based on the darker color of their skin, for example, or their different languages or their cultural practices, they are automatically deemed as illegal. Surely we cannot use the term undocumented. That is too much of a humane term for us to ascribe to such a group of people. The standard image of black African immigrants in mainstream media and social media platforms such as Twitter gives us the impression that a black immigrant in South Africa is a disease carrier, a job stealer, a drug dealer, a robber, a murderer, or a rapist, all of which are comments that have been made by our respondent. This therefore enables their attack with a clear conscience, because surely the killing and violation of non-humans, such as these, is neither a crime or a sin. With xenophobia and Afrophobia looming into a pandemic of its own, and immigrants constantly being used as scapegoats for all societal problems, in this host country that they find themselves, it seems unlikely that the African Charter on Human and People's Rights duty to contribute at all times and at all levels to the promotion and achievement of African unity will ever be possible. So I just leave that as a thought. Obviously, in the engagement part, we can unpack this more as far as solutions are concerned. Thank you.
Siposetu, we heard Sam describe a phenomenon of, I think it was 4 million neat young South Africans in discussing unemployment. So, still reflections are coming.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Siposetu Chwaku, currently serving as an RSA in one of our first-year residences. I am an HR student, and you know, as I was sitting, listening, and writing my notes and thoughts, my mind was kind of all over the place, because as the youth, there is so much happening, and so little influence that we have in everything, or in the results of what's happening around us and to us. And when Sam mentioned political consciousness, and throughout my years as a youth, I can say in high school I've been not really, I don't want anything to do with politics. And I got here, and politics became something that I had to look into and to know about, because it's influencing my life. And I can say I've been part of the youth that had this misconception or this assumption that being politically conscious means being involved in a political party. So I had this idea that, you know what, looking at the parties around me, I don't feel like I belong in any of those spaces, so I don't need to know anything about it. And as I've grown, I've realized it's not true, and it is not what's happening. So I've realized political consciousness comes with just engaging in your society, engaging in spaces that discuss issues that have to do with you, discuss issues that influence you and influence changes in your life. And I looked into, what's this? Sorry, I'm a bit nervous sitting here. It's a bit cold. But there's this questions I always have, especially in the beginning of the year, is since I've been here at NMU, every single year, okay, we'll just exclude the COVID years, but every single year at the beginning of the year, it's the worst time to be a student. And we are saying the same things. We've been having the same fights. We've been wanting the same things over and over, and I don't understand why we keep having to fight for the same things. And it's students will mobilize, students will be there, but the impression that we're not moving forward. Because to move forward, you need to see noticeable changes. You need to have different fights. How are we moving forward if we're having the exact same fights each and every single year? And then going into youth unemployment, it is a big one. And just looking at, okay, we'll take the graduates into the work field. And finding a job, difficult. You need to know people that know people that know people. And even then, the job that you get is not even something that you're qualified for, so what was the point of going to a university? And then we look at our environment of our high schoolers and the quality of education that they're getting. It's like there's no, our education system is not a leading or growing point. Like there isn't a point where you say, okay, I started here and this is where I'm going. You start somewhere. When you get to the next level of your education, you're basically starting at the bottom still. I came here, and in my first year, I was somewhat doing or learning things that I'd learned in grade 10. What was the point of me going through grade 10 if I was going to get here and repeat those things? It's like it's not a building foundation. You're just constantly laying ground. And there's nothing that you're building on top of or building towards. It seems like there's no end goal or destination, or just, it seems like there's no point in everything because you don't see where you're going and you don't see your progress because it's not evident in your educational life. As youth, I can say we grow more in social spaces than we do in educational spaces. And it's just, I don't see the point, because I can say, as a graduate, there's no difference to me in our society than someone that dropped out in grade 10, because we're in the same level, essentially. We're all grouped in the same, I think Sam said NEET group. That's where I am. That's where they are too. So what was the point of me going to varsity then? So I have more questions than I do, what's this? Answers or solutions. Because I'm finding myself in a position where I don't know. And I have to keep asking. And it's asking the same, it's going to different spaces and asking the same questions. It's meeting different people and asking them the same questions. And it's like, we're all asking ourselves questions, we'll come up with the solutions, but then what happens after that? Where and how far do we take it? Yeah, I think I'll end it there. Thank you.
Sakile, I've had the pleasure of reading your bio, and in your bio you speak about the importance of freedom, particularly for young people and the becoming of young people. So I'd like you to include in your reflections how crime levels in South Africa affect the freedom of young people.
Thank you. Greetings. Sanbonan. My name is Usakile Kamzimel. Just briefly, I'm the General Secretary of eThekwini District Youth Desk within South African Police Service. I would start by saying in my opening sentiments that one, this is my perspective before I go into what the question you've just posed. I think if our leaders cared about young people and also unemployment, they would adopt and they would go back into the Skills Development Act, and which clearly states that our government has an obligation to come to universities and engage them, and business people engaging them, bringing unskilled youth into equipping them and making sure that when they come out of that development, they are one, employment materials which will make them, of course, be permanently employed. There, I think we need to look into that more carefully, President, and all other leaders, to make sure that how can we bridge this gap of unemployment, and also this thing of crime. We are here today celebrating Hector Peterson and all these other leaders who did wonders back then. But today they say that history may not serve any purpose, because every year we are being told about the same people, yet we are facing so much crime rates. We are forgetting that we have our own issues, that as young people, as we are gathered here, we should be discussing them. But you'll find that our leaders will come with food parcels and T-shirts and whatnot, and telling us about Hector Peterson, which Hector Peterson fought his own battles and won those battles, and he moved on with his lives, and then maybe along the way he passed on. What about us? Why are we being imposed to this person who served no purpose in our lives? Every year we're being subjected to this person. Yet you find that there are women, about 18% of our women are scared of staying in residence because of the crime level rates, GBV number 1, which is so high within our crime statistics that we have been looking with Major General Keswa within eThekwini. Our women in particular are scared, even though they are studying here in these facilities, but they are scared of staying in residence, because if they are subjected, they get into relationships, they are subjected to violence. Even the SRC president, I'm sorry to refer to even SRC president and SRC board, when a woman cries, they are next door, they sleep like they are in a hotel. And the footage the next day shows that the woman was put in a dustbin, like that, and chopped. Those are the scary statistics of crime that we go under. And also we are the question is that, is it possible when we gather here sometime, even next year or 3 years down the line, to remove the Hector Peterson part and saying that June 16 is a year where we are making sure that we are tackling the issues of a young person and making sure that we are directing and solving all the issues that we are facing, besides saying that Hector Peterson, he was carried, he died like this year. What about me? What are the crimes that I am facing? What are the crimes that we are facing? Lastly,
Time, my leader.
Lastly, it is very important to, as young people, to pay much careful attention and really have a care and worry about ourselves that every quarter we look into what are the crimes, how can we make sure that we have a positive impact, how can we make sure that in varsity levels, community levels, we have programs suitable in protecting the women and children, and also our little sisters, and securing their minds that when they go into varsity, they will be cared for. When they go into varsity, they will be protected. When they go into the spaces of our society, there will be people who will make sure that whenever someone raises their hand at them and saying that this is not how we do things in our society, it will not start with us, and it must end with us. Thank you.
Nande. Ulin the question does. I tell does okay. In your reflections, please add some reflection on the causes and the responses to the skills shortage that is plaguing our country and our youth. I think it's the average age of President Ramaphosa's cabinet. And so please reflect on that.
Manibambe ngazo zozibini kuwe mphathi Nqobo. And ndisibulisele nakuyo wonke umuntu okhoyo namhlanje and ndibulele ngelithuba to become a panelist in such a monumental event. I think we can all agree that indeed we are standing on top of the shoulders of giants, people that came before us. But the question is with us. What is our agency as the youth of today? Umbuzo ke the usisi that posed on me, I would love to answer it in terms of education, because it's one of the reasons why we find ourselves in a situation where unemployment is also rising, because asinando esiqhubayo okanye asinando esinothi sakhela phezu kwayo esinothi siyayakha siyayenza. We have no skills esizifundisiweyo in our education system. Education system yethu, I would say it mostly answers the questions of the Industrial Revolution. And ngoku kwixesha esiphila kulo, we can all agree that we are in the 4th Industrial Revolution actually. And therefore, iti londo leyo ukubana education yetu should cater to such. Those are the skills that we need right now. Umzekelo, I for one, ndiqale ukwazi computer skills when I came here to varsity. But umntana umzekelo ngoku osekrich ungamnika tablet and they know what to do with it. Yet, education system yethu uzaya kwa A la mntana ayofundiswa uba A for apple. Endaweni okanye makalabhelishe iworm. Endaweni yobala A amkhangele amlabhelishe on the keyboard. meaning that we're going backwards. The skills that we are being given, they are pulling us backwards. Ndidlule. And you see, also our education, our education should also prioritize agriculture, sports, arts and culture, as well as skills-based educational programs, as Mr. Kamani did mention, artisanry, abantu abathungayo. At home, ekhaya, kukhona abantu that make beads, but bangaphi abantu abakwazi ukuzenza ezi zinto, because there is a market for us ngoku. If you look at TikTok, umzekelo, the digital era is opening a market for us, for a global market at even, where we have much more access to people abangekho lapha ecaleni kwethu that do appreciate the culture yethu. Yabo. But then those things, they are not being prioritized. Akuzozinto ezithathelwa ingqalelo in our educational system. And xa ndimenshina i-arts and culture, umzekelo, here in the Bay, kukhona Impuma Kapa TV. There is theaters here, but how many of these students know about that? How many abayazi ubana there is opportunity in media abanokwazi to tap into? So in a way, what I'm trying to say is the education yet is backward. It's backward, and those are the things that we need to focus on, because arts and culture, as well as sports, and what else did I mention? Yeah, but they also in terms of economic transformation, because in their nature you can sell those skills, meaning that they are entrepreneurial, and ilondole incede our whole economy. And lastly, what we can do as student leaders is to sort of like evoke a spirit of self-reliance in our fellow youth, a spirit of self-reliance. Because if you can sort of like saying we do the work of the state through our interior lives, and that means and there's something that you can do, then it sort of becomes a domino effect. Akukho tshintsho lizoza ngoba kube khona isikhaxa sabantu kuthiwa benze into ethile. Starts with me, and then naye whatever he is doing naye ayenze. So into ebalulekileyo kukuba sibe leaders, even if you're not going to lead the whole nation, but a leader of yourself as well. Enkosi.
Tshwarelo, as the last panelist, please also add in your reflection something about service delivery and the impact that service delivery has on our lives, or lack thereof, and what we can do to combat that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Ntax. As you correctly accused me that my name is Tshwarelo, my name is Sekhano. I am guilty as charged. I will try to be short like a miniskirt, but I try to be long enough to cover all aspects. I'm currently a master's student, LLM, specializing in criminal justice. I'm also serving as a postgraduate associate at the Faculty of Law. I'm also a member of the Faculty of Law Engagement and Transformation Committee. Thank you. First of all, I would love to thank the opportunity given to me to Conrad to come and address this very much prestigious event that engages on challenges that are facing us as young people. Prof. Ngomezulu, with your team, as well as to the panelists as well, I'm very gracious to have an opportunity to sit and engage with you. And to the speaker as well as respondent, former TP, Comrade Sniff. I would love to say, all protocol observed. I would love to start with a quote that was made by one of the greatest leaders to ever live or set foot in this world, President Oliver Tambo, where he says, the children of any nation are its future. Any country, any nation or movement that does not take care of its youth is doomed to fail. Well, a young mind in nature is a highly contested terrain. It's a center of ideas. By being young, naturally, you have energy. It comes natural, and you have many ideas. But the problem will be, is that energy or that those ideas, are they located and directed towards the right direction to ensure that there is a prosperous future? The speaker, Sam, spoke very much in detail about programs that are happening around government, such as the Integrated Development Program. And we need to ask ourselves, are those programs very much useful to us as young people? Well, the first thing that we need to understand is that at some point, we will take over this country. It will be us who will be leading. Whether we like it or not, naturally, the old will die and their time will pass. But the question we need to ask ourselves, are we the correct leaders that are going to take over this country and move it to a certain direction that is going to be very useful to those who will come after us? Remember, those who come after us, they will be sitting like this as us, discussing us, that these ones don't want to leave, these ones are failing us. Each and every day, we hear sad stories. It's no longer now gender-based, being committed by parents to one another. It's us, young people, who are advancing this thing, and they are very gruesome that are being done by us. So we need to challenge ourselves what type of leadership we want. We say we want leadership that will advance issues of poverty, that will advance women emancipation, that will remove all forms of xenophobia and all forms of attack. But are we that type of leadership currently as young people? Are we advancing those things currently, or we are actually the perpetuators of making sure that they continue to happen in our lives? The issue of education was also touch-based. Education, comrades and friends, you must know, as the person whose name is named after the university, Tata Nelson Mandela once said, it is the most powerful weapon that one can use to change the world. As an academic myself, I can testify, education does not only come from the classroom. If you think someone must stand in front of you with a chalk and a board to write, to give you knowledge, then you will be missing the point. Education comes to each and every step that we take in life and try to make sure we make use of it to make sure that we change our lives. Comrades, youth unemployment is not only facing people who are educated. And we must not only speak about youth unemployment, that we speak about youth graduates. We must know that when we speak about youth, we speak about the youth that went to school, and some of us, unfortunately, didn't have the opportunity, or we didn't reach a point of being graduates. Are we creating a possibility? The government, always say they want a better life for all. They give us the stats that there's a projection youth has gone down by 3%. Although we don't want those things. We don't want those things. But we need practical solutions that will make sure that we eliminate all forms that can make sure that young people are not employed. Remember, unemployment comes with a lot of things. Use of drugs, mental health, which is a very serious issue that we must always touch base on. Our mental health as young people, because we are going through a lot. And a lot that we are going through is making us make a lot of things that are not good for us. So we really need to have such discussions and make sure that as young people, as Prof said about the quote of Frantz Fanon, that we must discover our own mission. We must, Sniff says he hates Fanon, but let's look at the words sometimes. As drunkards will say, don't look at me being drunk, listen to what I say. So at this point, we will look at what Fanon is saying. He's challenging each and every young person that we really need to discover ourselves. And at this point, I don't think we're doing that enough as young people. But there's always a room for improvement. Chair, I'm not eating your time, ne? Because my students like to complain that I go overboard, even in class. But I try my utmost best. But there's a lot that is being said. On service delivery, in order for services to come, whether you like it or not, ourselves as young people, we need to be engaged, we need to be socially aware, and we need to participate. You don't participate on Facebook and think the revolution will change. Yes, times have changed. Those platforms must be there to make sure that it makes us easier to mobilize ourselves, to gather, and make decisions for ourselves. All people, whether you like it or not, you cannot really insult them all the time because you're going to be old at some point yourself. But we need to challenge the status quo as young people to make sure that, because the next in 4 years, time up please, wrap up. Oh, I'm wrapping up. Let me wrap up. In future, our children, our siblings' children will be the ones who will be blaming us for each and everything that has happened from today. To avoid all that, such platforms are very important. Let's not only do them in university, let's go back to our communities and make sure that we advance the meaningful change that we all need. Thank you very much.
All right, comrades, we've reached the part of the program that I think many of us have been waiting for, which is the part where we all get to engage. There is not much time, I must say that, so there will be one round of questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sisi at the back. I think Rasta ben kalenga. Chom, Rasta loa. I think you are number 4, Pangush. All right, there will be a second round. So if you have not been noted in this round, please relax. There will be a second round.
Amandla. Awethu. Amandla. Awethu. Uzoyithola kanjani? Uhlele khoneni. Uzoyithola kanjani? Thank you very much. I would like to appreciate the opportunity given. Simply, my name is Professor Luthando Kanza, well known as Rasta. Mine will be shortly. My first question goes to Sam. Why is there a big difference between your own town, which is Zwide and Summerstrand, and you claim you can provide a suitable change? Okay. You have been talk about the unemployment rate. In terms of unemployment rate, I think we must be honest to ourselves. Skills we do have as the young person. We do have all what is needed. But what the problem is the resources. There is a program of SASCO of providing sanitary pads for students that does not have a funding. But Umeya, he refuses to have intervention of funds to make those students to provide sanitary pads for those students. If ever they are failing with pads, how can they build the branch within a week? Okay. Speaking of unemployment graduates, why is it there is no any grant for graduates so that they can go and look for jobs? Looking for jobs is very expensive itself. You need transport. You need transport. Azania attached that we are in the 4th industrial revolution. You cannot go into gates and bring your own CV. You have to do it online. You have to do everything on Microsoft. Another question to Twarelo is that, speaking of change, I would propose as a youth that we scrap tender system. A lot of money laundering and corruption is done through tender system. We should cancel that tender system and look at the alternatives.
Thank you, my leader. Ixesha leadership. Ixesha, my leader. High discipline. High moral. High discipline. High moral.
Arresting Putin to come in South Africa. We believe in Putin. Putin have been with
Okay,
us for
comrade.
long.
Siyabonga, comrade. Number 2. Yeah. Comrades, can I ask that we keep our questions short? Ne? We are eager for a second round, but it needs us to be disciplined in our engagement. Number 2. Bonke aba bantu banu-20 xa baphakamise isandla ndizabaxelela bangubani number 2.
Good day, everyone. I am Olindo Guhle Sbego. I'm finally a LLB student. So I have a question for Uput Q. Uput Q's name for. He, at his opening, he mentioned something along the lines that he has been accused of being a Marxist. And that also came to me then. It opened a whole trail of thought about how we are the youth of today, and we are asked to, we have a duty to mass mobilize, we have a duty to push the agenda. The struggle is not over. We still need freedom to emancipate ourselves of the economic, social, cultural borders that have been made between ourselves. So maybe if you could be kind enough to explain to us why you think people are accusing you of being a Marxist. And in the same lines, don't we think, as a society, as a youth, perhaps the real problem why we keep having these platforms and these conversations, we have these hashtags, we have all these campaigns that we're making and pulling through for, but no heed is given to our call. What if we lack a theory, a Marxist theory? Who do you think in our day and age could be somebody that could embody that type of theory? Who do you think holds a certain vision? Like Mark, if you were to give me a name now, a campaign, a group, a person that you think holds an agenda to push the vision? Thank you.
Bangush.
I thought I was number 4. But nonetheless, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Atengos. My surname is Bangusha. And you know, listening to the discussions, a lot comes to mind, but because of time, Zamuba short on a president, but it was a scholar. You know, there is a TED talk by one Italian humanitarian. His name is Ernesto Sorelli. Now, this man speaks about a project where they had in some African country. Now, these people came, inspected the land without interacting with the natives, right? Inspected the land and they saw that, no, this land is very fertile and is conducive for growing tomatoes, right? And through their research, they went on to implement. They planted tomatoes along the river banks and so on and so forth. And rightfully so, the tomatoes grew, but when it was time for harvesting, hippos came off the water and ate the tomatoes. And then, it is then that they went back, but you did not ask. Now, if you listen to this story, there are 2 lessons to be learned. I'm a social worker by profession, so you'll bear with me. Okay, that's not right. But nonetheless, look, it's Veyers who says each and every community has the ability to analyze and come up with solutions to their own problems. One other author says, experience is the greatest teacher. Articulated by the person himself. That's number 2. So, one, these ones did not ask. They just did it for themselves in the name of helping. But in the process, they were wasting resources. And number 2 is the issue of conditions, colleagues. Sometimes, sometimes mchanam uthetha into right, ebantwini aba-right, endaweni right, but ngexesha le-wrong. Now that is very important, right? Now, one, as young people, as Nefu correctly puts it, we live in a society whereby old people sit in boardrooms and discuss solutions to problems that are facing young people. And young people are not there. Right? And in that process, perhaps not you might encounter the situation of the hippo, whereby hippos will eat our tomatoes without us having benefited from those tomatoes. Right? Things might come to the fore, resources might be there, and so on and so forth. But we won't be able to get access to them because there will be hindrances along the way. And secondary to that, I don't like this thing of speaking about 1994 and so on and so forth, because our problems, I would argue, started in 1910, but nonetheless, and I won't give a history lesson. Right? Oh, no, I'm about to sit down. Sorry for the president. Now I'm saying, if you look at our history, majority of the time, we're a society that has been taught that monetary and material benefit take precedence over what is called moral incentives. Right? At its peak, apartheid was the highest form of capitalism in our country, where we were taught that work hard so that we can reap the benefits. Get rich by all means. It has been embedded, right, into our being. Now, I say kolando iti for the greater good. If our goal is to open that door, and my capabilities will take us as far as that speaker, but I have the ability to also carry someone on my back. Why can't I carry Twa, Siam, and reach that speak? And from that speak, I say, Twa, carry on, we do not have that. Right? Tina Spambele Ndobana, Kaingenile, Upangushe is the youngest person to speak at council chambers. Hey, that's it. Pangushe is the first black person to be a Ndondo at NMMU. Hey, that's it. First female, blah, blah, blah. We love those things. But where is that thing of saying, I am doing this for the greater good? I am doing this for the next generation, as Swa correctly puts it. Right? Now, we are in that society. Right, and conditions are like that. Now, can we safely say, Silapa, with all that we are speaking, na abonomnqushwana bakhona abafunde esikolweni sibakhulisa kweli lizwe in these conditions that we speak of. Now, how do we expect abantwana tomorrow to rise up and say, I'm doing it for the nation, whereas they've been raised in conditions that says get rich by all means? Now, comrades, I want us to discuss along those lines. Are we living in a society whereby we're able to raise young people that will carry and take the revolution forward? Or are we raising abantu abazofana noPaul and say, I'm a Marxist, Karl Marx says. And Karl Marx speaks very beautifully. But within that Marxism, I stand to benefit myself And when I benefit from my Marxism, I'm fine with it. I'm Chan. The revolution, ha, ha, ha. Ladies and man, a revolution, communism, blah, 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 blah. But there's nothing that speaks communism about my lifestyle and how I conduct myself. All these themes, theories, and whatnot, we know them. We read about them and whatnot. But what we use them for, I would love to think it's not what they were intended for. Because we speak these theories to some smart amongst our peers. But when it comes to praxis, nothing comes of fruition. Colleagues, yeah, hey, I'm about to give my own lecture, President Lian.
Number 4. I think it was Luzuko first, then it will be Yusuf.
Thank you so much. My name is Luzuko Mbumbulwana, small bullet. I am a master's candidate in the chemistry discipline. I'm a transformation officer in the SRC. Yes, fruitful engagement indeed. I won't be long, but for me, I think from the engagement, the main question that I could say we are gathered for, that we all need to answer and come to an agreement, is what we as the youth are committing to. Because I think it's been so long we've been having gatherings of this nature where we do not come up with resolutions that each and every one of us commits to, and time moves forward. Sibane inaugural lectures and memorial lectures of stalwarts and Ostibiko that have actually made the path clearer for us, but Tina, we do not come to a point where we actually commit to something and hold each other accountable towards what we have agreed on. So that's one thing that I want to highlight very much. Uba sibe nento siphuma nayo, because as you say, to highlight it, up in Nelson Mandela, every year we are going to have a strike of whatever nature, because silwela uba NSFAS wati okanye there's housing, it's the same issues, but sinqeshe endaweni enye, ne? Because nathi we do not hold each other accountable, ne? We allow ourselves to be manipulated by the conditions of Nelson Mandela, as Pangoshe put it, ne? And I've said before, Uba, my experience also with Nelson Mandela, the environment it creates is that of sustaining and maintaining our psychological and mental and physical poverty, ne? Because it does not assist us in any way. Uba sizolwela one every year. Nelson Mandela, iyazi the kind of students that it admits, Uba it's from Eastern Cape largely, and very poor, whether Nabanye, Basukeli, Limpopo, and international. But the kind of students that it admits, it knows very well, because it looks at those dates, but it creates and maintains that environment. And obviously the outcome will be that of individualism from all of us. Ne? Umntu uzolwela lenda zayifumana nobize njani. Ne? I'm not going to look at you. If there's strike up, aba baqethayo baye eklasini bazithi no ndibhatalela mama mna kanye tatam, ne, ukula middle class, and akana consciousness about, okay, it's not necessarily about you than it is about the collective, ne? But the environment and obviously the statements from universities and the responses that it's going to give us will be that of dividing us and not seeing that collective cause. Hence, the city, I want from all of us to commit, ne,
because of 2020, what, next year? For, busy. Election konke. I want us, because nalo 1994, which is next year, we need to have decided, okay, are we being represented there after that 1994 that we're going to be deciding in? So yeah, thank you so much.
Greetings to you all. I trust that you are well. My name is Antoinette Kumalo, and one of my questions is actually based on Luzugo's last point, is that why is our youth getting a bursary based on our parents' fortunes? Because sometimes it might happen that I'm in a middle class, but how does it happen that if my parents loses a job, I still stay in the middle class and I'm not granted NSFAS? And number two, I can be woken up at 6 a.m. by the SRC members knocking our doors, eresi, let's go fight for NSFAS and whatnot. Yet I know I'm not going to get it because I'm still labeled as middle class. Why is that? And secondly, some of us been fighting for jobs, so whatnot, but would you blame one if things come easily because of someone older, someone richer, and then they come under their influence? Should we be blamed for that?
All right, thank you, leaders. I do not envy our speakers and our panelists who need to tackle this line of questioning. I am going to start with our speakers because I think Sabat Kobelek Dala. Sam?
Okay. Hey, Rasta. Oh, I wonder what has informed that name, but yeah, I scored up. I hope it's not issues of Intangu, but yeah. No, you are welcome there if you're plus. You must come visit. No, I think, Butrasta, you raise critical questions. Look, Uputati now touched on it a little bit. We can never deny the legacy and the impact of apartheid spatial planning, and as to how that informs why Summerstrand is the way it is today and why Efia Plus is the way it is today. But having said that, I still believe that, and I think this is where I slightly differ with Uat, in that 1994 is critical, and the nearly 3 decades of how we have governed, understanding what we have inherited. It requires of us as young people to hold our public representatives accountable. And to be honest, we don't. We use social media platforms to vent out. We don't participate in the legislative processes that are available to us. You'll find in, for example, the IDP meetings I talk about in the city. I'll use Nelson Mandela Bay as an example. When IDP meetings are called, and they're very critical because, as I explained earlier on, that is where plans for communities are decided on. They're crafted. That is where budget discussions happen, because we say as Bahlali, as Fear Plus, you have got so much money for this financial year. What do you want to do with that money? You'll find that in terms of attendance, there are little to no young people in that meeting. And that is where, Tina, as youth, we have to be critical of ourselves. We have to reflect and say, why is it that we can be so quick to get dressed up and go to a white tiger? We can be so quick to go to Galani Umkolas, Kwa Galani Umkola. We can be so quick to create content for TikTok, etc., etc. There's so many examples. And I'm not saying to be social, to socialize. You know, we have different aspects of our lives. It's fine. But what I'm trying to say is in terms of the governance of not our communities, ourselves. You know, young people, what I want to say, I don't want to be too long, but we must not talk about the state and government as this thing that's far away from us. It is us. When you talk about a clinic, it is our clinic. When you talk about a school, it is our school. Don't talk about an institution of higher learning like NMU as this far away thing. Non-din, res, that's it. No, it is your res. You must govern it. Whether you have a seat of power or not, that's where we can have a discussion around the future as to how do we, because to be fair, colleagues, we don't have the best of electoral systems at the moment in SA. You vote for a political party, that's where it starts and ends. For now. We're trying to reform and say, why don't we have independence contest? We'll see in the future, does it work out or not. But for now, we are stuck with that. We are stuck with the councillor that we have for 5 years. Not 1 year, 5 years. So you might unfortunately have a councillor that earns their salary every month, but that you never... By the way, we have councillors, ward councillors now, who run to be a ward councillor, who don't even live in the ward that they've run to be a councillor for. So you'll find umtus or contest 4+ uyohlala Summer Strand that you're talking about. And we don't see them for 5 years. So young people, part of it is our elected public reps. And I want to say this, I'm not even talking about the ANC. There's the ANC in 8 provinces. There's the DA in the Western Cape. They govern in the Western Cape, people of Kwezi. There are all these other parties as well that also now govern in hung municipalities across the country. So it is a general thing to say, hold your public reps accountable for how they use budgets, for whether they render services or not. That's when we'll start to dig deep. Just lastly, in terms of budgets, we have 3 categories every year. I'm a public official, I'm not a politician. I'm a public official, I'm one of the people who sits and goes, okay, this government got so much money. And I also want to say this, comrades, we are not poor. This country is not poor. There is a lot of money in the state. We can talk about private sector, how private sector also needs to transform, it's racist, it needs to do a lot more for black youth that it's failed to do for even pre-94. We can talk about a white capitalist private sector and its role. But in terms of the state, it is not short of money. We've got 3 categories. 1, money that is spent but goes missing. 2, money that is spent but that is fruitless and wasteful. So it means that the services and goods procured are not impactful. Many of you spoke about that earlier on. And number 3, money, sadly, that is unspent. So it's money lying there, waiting for the clinic to be fixed, but it gets rolled over to the next year by National Treasury. Or National Treasury even says, Yazi, this municipality is not interested in spending this money, we'll give it to someone else. So those are the governance types of issues. I think as young people, when we are going to govern, because we are going to govern, I don't know, just lastly, if we will make it, and I'm not a negative person, I'm very positive, but I'm being realistic. I don't know if we can wait another 20, 30, 40, 50 years to govern and be the 65-year-old like we have now in Parliament taking decisions. We must understand, Tina, in this room, we are young people that at least, and I hate to say it's very condescending and patronizing, but at least we are in school. We are in university, we are perhaps in a TVET college. the NEET category I was talking about earlier on are young people who 90% they don't have a chance. There's no school, there's no education, there's no formal training at a TVET college. Someone spoke about artisan school skills. They're not in university. What do we expect our fellow young people in that position to do? Do we honestly expect, and this is now to the older crop of leaders here today, do we expect those young people to not retaliate in time? I think I can't guarantee if I was in that position, without some form of retaliation. And by the way, just lastly, that retaliation is starting to come out in some of the patterns of behavior in society we see. It comes out in our crime stats. It comes out in GBVF. It comes out in vandalism of our infrastructure. It comes out because it is a cry out of desperation to say, what are my leaders doing? But I don't think we should ask that question anymore as to what our leaders, we should be asking, what are we doing as young people? TikTok, all of that, great, not a problem. By the way, social media can be a very powerful tool to transform society as well. We mustn't disregard it. But it cannot be the only tool. To go and cry out on those platforms cannot be the only tool. We have to mass mobilize. We have to educate ourselves and become politically and socially conscious. Yeah, there isn't time. I also wanted to just talk about my own population group, the responsibility of white beneficiaries. I don't see them here in Namhlanje, but it's a discussion for another day. I'll hand over to my respondent. Ngiyabonga, thank you.
Can you hear me, guys? I don't like holding things in my hand. Yeah, thank you very much. We have a very clever crowd. Yeah, I must applaud you. You are very clever and you are raising sharp discussions. And it's very rare that you find young people converging in a space like this and discussing things that are going to carry the ambitions and aspirations of the country forward. Let me applaud you on that. Kwezi, I agree with everything you said, but I want to challenge you. Implement. Everything that you have said is correct to the T, but please implement. We have the power in terms of Section 35 of the Higher Education Act of 1997. You are a statutory creature, a creature of statute. You have powers. You're a member of council. You take decisions that you must implement. Adelaide, my sister, Africa is a very cursed continent. It's where people take from, and until we start taking, nothing is going to change. And analyze it here, but Africans must be the next takers. Take, my sister. Whatever a person is saying now is my turn. Must say that, must take. That's all I have to say to you. But when congruence that what you have said, I agree with you. It's very unfortunate that you must do what you did. You did the same thing. It was like a calendar event. We even had to call it a name, but it's the right to learn campaigns of Funda Ngani. What did you say, Sam, in your time? Sucking home, so. And pass they are saying that education for Africans. But what we're saying is that the university will never change. It's a systematic and systemic problem. What must change is how you approach and challenge the university. A frog will remain a frog and it will quack. But what you do with it, you hold it by its neck and kill it. The university must die, it must die. Not inciting anything, but how you approach the university is going to be very important, and you must be creative. Sakile. Oh, the crime levels in South Africa. I deal with courts. I'm a legal practitioner on a daily basis. I have some 8 students who are charged. The Equazi still owes me my bill. He has not paid me. They are outside, but they are coming back to court on the 17th. They are charged by the same university. And this university will continue with the charges. And the charges are in contravention of an order that you must challenge. Even if you do not brief me or give me instructions to challenge that order, but you must challenge it. You are the SRC president. But generally, gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa is not a problem of the government. It's the problem of each and every individual here. When he starts raising his voice, when he's reprimanding you for not taking his call, you must say to him, Puti, you are not a problem today, but what you have done today is a problem for tomorrow, therefore it's over. When she starts saying to you that awulalanga bendlini because you attended a sports program, when you have attended a SASCO or DASO or EFF student command or DASO program because you had a night vigil in support of the fight against exploitation of black marginalized students by universities. Then when she starts questioning it, tell her that me and you were not tailor-made for each other. And because of that, I'm saying it's over. You must not allow her to kill you. You must not allow him to beat you. The first instance that he starts raising his voice, the first instance that they question your revolutionary intentions, say it's over. Onande, the agency of today cannot be postponed. I'm a person who was raised in a nuclear family. My parents are still married, even today. But the problems of South Africa start broken families. I am a teenage father myself. I'm a product of a system that produced me to procreate whilst I was still in high school. Even today, I could have a Porsche or a Mercedes Benz or a car, because I have a child who will call me and say that, Tata, that's the problem. We must deal with historical imbalances of the past by changing our own selves and our own systems first. Ukuzala ungekatshati ungekavumelani nomuntu ukuba sawuhlala sobabini forever is wrong. The problem we have as young people is that we do not want to take responsibility when we are assessing our problems. We contribute to it because umbali, umusa, uminenhle, akana tata uhlala naye on a daily basis, utata uhlala postgrad village. And utata akamboni umbali uba uqalisa ukuchaya ngo. Akamboni umbali ngoku uyacofa esikolweni, uyaphuzwa eklasini emva kweclass xa iphumile. And therefore, that is a problem because umbali will also become a generational curse in my family because I'm not there to reprimand her. That's what we must speak about. So, I disagree with Tambo in posterity. Tambo, in the privilege of age, he was old when he said that. And he characterized wrongly people who are under the age of 18 as children. Mandela as well. The reason why we're not taken serious is because we're called children. We must be called young people or we must be called by name. Amani, what you're doing is wrong. Not Ndanam. You miniaturize your importance in society and your contribution in your family or in community because you are referred to as a child. And the Constitution, I said in my initial input that we are not referred to as young people, but we are defined only as children under a certain age. And we are made a table under the state of emergency that we are under 35. That's all you must think about the future when we have a state of emergency. Until we posit ourselves as young people that we are forced to be reckoned with. We are not Mtanam, I am Kamani, and this is my view. And my view, either you interact with it, discuss it, disagree with it, engage it, we agree, and move forward. But it's my view. It's not a Mtanami view. Well, the old must die, not because we want to take over from them. The old must die, having transferred each and everything that we require for a sustainable future. This thing must be analyzed. Oh, must not say, I want to be a king, my father must die, I'm the next in line. No. It must be because my father has taken all the time, my mother has taken all the time to teach me that this is what I've seen before in life, and therefore, when you meet a challenge like this is how I addressed it. It might be different, but this is where you start. So we must hold old people accountable, including myself. I'm relatively old now. We must hold old people accountable that they must not die peacefully without telling us what they've seen. Xhosa says, "Inyati ibuzwa kwabaphambili." Abanye abayibonanga iargue, but those who have seen it must tell us. We cannot say that old people must perish because they are old. Old people are a very important repository in African culture. That's why in African culture we recognize umakhulu. I don't know why they do not recognize utamkhulu as a very important person as well, because they have traversed the path within which in the near future will traverse as well. So the old must die, but they must die having told us what must happen. To the questions. Rasta, you have asked a question that is even baffling my mind today. Why were black people here taken from Costin and taken to New Brighton? It is because of the legislative, angry, backward, and racist policies of apartheid. Fairfoot was taken here to go and start how to divide the society. At no point in time was we ever vacillate in saying that white people are the problem and they remain the problem until they agree and also assist in the redress of the problem. You must occupy people of Luandle until white people say that no more. Until they come closer to Stellenbosch and say that Kayam Nandi is also a place where a white person can stay. Why can't a white person, like Sam has said here, she's an example, by the way, that must be followed by other white people, that I can mix with Fair Plus and stay there, not because of my race, but because I identify cohabitatively that I want to stay with this person regardless of the allocation or spatial planning of the apartheid era. So the reasons are political, Rasta. The reasons are economical. The reasons are physical. Because white people did not just decide to stay away from a black person. It was a result of a scientific study, flawed by the way, that a black person is inferior to a white person. And therefore, for those reasons, they decided that we are going to rule these people. These people are backward, these people are not civilized, and we are going to teach them how to live. And the entitlement of a white man over a black body is still persisting even in 2023. The entitlement of a man against a feminine body, a frail body, an old body, and a young body is still existing even today. And such must continue. The women and gender studies said must be a man. You must include after that women, men, and gender studies center. Because when you exclude men from the process of rectifying the past, you are not going to win. Because they will become automatically defensive. Artie, I will engage with you at PGSV. I will not waste the time of this congregation on you because you know my views. And suffice to say that perhaps 1910 ARTI is only an interventionist approach after depositations were made. It does not begin there. It begins in 1495, when the Spanish and the Portuguese were defeated in Europe. They landed in Africa, and they used the advancement in terms of technology and artillery to oppress Africans. It further became permanent in 1652. 1910 is only a legislative remnant or a memory, but it was rubber stamped in 1910, and I agree with you. But in 1909, when our depositations were refused by the Queen to form part of the Union of South Africa after the Anglo-Boer War of 1899 and 1902, we were excluded as black people, and therefore we took a decision in 1912 to form the African National Congress. That must be said here in this sermon. Did not start in 1994. 1994 is neither a win, it's just a transition. If we were talking about transport, it's not a tar road, it's just a gravel to access your home. Lindo Kuhle, you charge me, but you do not complete the charge sheet in full. And there are no alternative charges. I am a Marxist because I was a SASCO leader. And SASCO uses tools of Marxism to analyze society. Because I'm a student, I exist in a macrocosmos. Macrocosmos is a little space where one exists. But I belong to the greater society. And when I analyze society, I do not analyze society outside where I come from. And therefore, I'm accused of a Marxist. And I plead guilty to that charge. And if there's an alternative, I'm a Pan-Africanist. I'm a Pan-Africanist because I'm an African. Not because of my genes only, but because of my identification with the struggles of black people. The struggles of black people is why I am a 30-year-old man who's staying in residence. The struggle of a black person, why must I undergo thorough and gruesome training of 6 years before I can speak on behalf of other people? Whereas by birthright, and because I assume a certain position in society as a black person, and by my age and my experience, I could speak for them. But the courts of South Africa do not allow me. I'm a black person because I was forced to have sex in pleasure, to forget my pain and procreate. And therefore, other people your age here in high school are going to engage the same thing. And there's no legislation prohibiting sex under the ages of a certain age. That you must arrest each and every person who engages in sexual conduct under a certain age, because we're in a liberal constitution. I'm a black person because I do not have money when I come here. The only thing when I come out here I must do, I must look for a 20 rand, mix it with artist 20 rand, with sangaras 20 rand, and go and buy alcohol and forget about my misery, because all of us are unemployed. I'm a black person because I must either choose to have money, or I must either choose to take money from another person, dispossess them their property, and then when I do that, I commit crime, and the government will classify it as a crime, but I have nothing to live with because I'm hungry. Therefore, I choose to be a Marxist and a Pan-Africanist, not because of my choosing, because of my condition where I exist, and my existence must thrive through only Marxism. I submit. Lastly, Luzuko, you're a very smart person. You say one thing which cannot be answered. And your question also cannot be answered. You know the answer to the socio-economic question in South Africa. Our history cannot be erased, but we cannot rewrite our history the same way our parents did. What we need to do, when we agree on a certain program, you must not only say that we agree that we're going to have a quadessa, but you must actually set a date and be present there. Until we have that quadessa, nothing is going to change. We are going to comment on TikTok, on Twitter, troll other people, come here, have these seminars, until we have that quadessa. And I must say, I am very displeased as a respondent invited here that no one entertained my thesis that young people are their own enemy. Everyone here was pleased to ask us questions, comment, or anything. no one owned up that they also contribute to their own demise. No one owned up to say that I am guilty as charged. Tshwarelo pled guilty to his name. Did not plead guilty to the program. The program I propose here is that until young people of South Africa, across all racial lines, class barriers and gender constraints, must agree that we are going to have a program and we are going to own it and run with it outside the ANC, outside the DA, outside the EFF. Director, I want to land with a very controversial thing to Sam. White people who are not so smart, white people who are not so rich are in the public sector. And white people who are smart and identified by capital, that they are smart, all of them either leave the country or are in private sector as captains of industry. All of them. You can, in my year, there was a boy from, I was a debater in high school. There was a boy from Grahamstown. He was a top achiever in our year. And top achiever was only calculated in terms of maths and physics. But we were top achievers in our languages. We were never given national awards. White people identify what they want from society and they appreciate it. And they reward it. Mandela, Mbeki, who was this man, Mutlante, Zuma, and Ramaphosa, have not identified what black people need, award it and reward it. Fairhood had the brother or brotherhood, I don't know Africans. They had the brother bond, and they came up with a program and identified all top white students in the country at that time. They took them, sent them for a certain project, came back. Mbeki was taken. The same method was taken out of the country to study so that he can come back. That's why he had a fight with Cyril Ramaphosa. Because Cyril Ramaphosa was not part of the black revolutionaries that he would lead this country. That's why Mbeki had to lead before him. And when Mbeki came back, he failed dismally to create black intelligentsia who are going to take over for him. Hence he stood in Polokwane for the third term, because he did not see Zuma as part of the intelligentsia that are going to take this country forward. So black people who are in this room, who must identify who is smart, the loud hailer must not lead EFF. The loud hailer must not lead DASO. The loud hailer must not lead SASCO. The loud hailer must not lead. The smart people must lead your organizations so that you can have solutions to your problems. Mantla.
Comrades, comrades, ikhona into esiyilungisayo apha phandle. So if I keep you here for longer, there will be a reward. Ndinqena nokhutha iBhayibhile kayithi kukumvuzo ekulindini. Khona umvuzo ozayo. So I am going to open up for that second round. Ndifuna ufocusa kwabantwana abancinci. Ndifuna ufocusa kwabantwana abancinci kule round. Ndicela nindixolele, please forgive that. I want to focus kwabantwana abancinci. Ndiyambona utishara sethinzile. Uyadeploya. Okay, ndifuna ufocusa kwabantwana abancinci ne. High discipline. High morale. Okay. Ndiyafocus ke ngoku. Andifuni nobafaka under pressure. Okay. Ndonqena nobafaka under pressure abantwana. Rasta ungahlisa mntase phelile yakho. Phelile yakho mntasekhaya. Okay. Hi, discipline. Okay. So I'm going to take 3 hands for this round. 1. I think there was a hand at the back. Yeah. 2. Lindo Guche. Okay, I'll take you, put in the green cap. 3. Olin. Chum. Chomi. See 3 as Zang. All. Number 1, sorry. Nangu number 1.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, President. Lo uthethayo nguThando Soga. But gay students have given me a very unique name, Lithi Adiwele, and it means victory. So I'll start here. I'm not a person who normally quotes, but I'm going to quote Arch Desmond Tutu when he said, "I am because we are." NgesiXhosa it says, "Umtu ngumtu ngabantu." There is something very unique that is starting to disappear, which I have noticed inside our societies when we go home. There is something which was passed down from a very old bloodline of our people, and which I am seeing when I go home sometimes with societies, is that you'll find there is that certain individual inside the community whereby when the people pass by indlu yako kwabo, they say, "Ibingumntu lo." This was an embodiment of others. I'm looking at the current state of affairs of the country. And ndingatsho uba ndiyoyika, I'm afraid. I'm afraid for us. I'm afraid for us all. Because there is a concept of leadership which is lost. That concept of what is a leader. And I am glad that Mr. Tshwarelo has touched on this subject. You will find in today's time, when we go outside, it's easy for us to address each other as leadership. Leadership, leadership. Leadership. It's a way of greeting. But the core aspect of it, it's lost. It's lost. We think we are, and yet we are not. Now, the question that I would like to pose, not to the panelists, not to Mr. Tshwarelo, no Sam, not Gokamani, I want to pose to each and every one of you sitting here. What type of a leader I am? And what is it that I want to produce for the betterment of my people? Am I that person in which one day when I lay rest, people will pass by my graveyard to say, "Eish, ibingumntu ke lo." This was an embodiment of people. Are you that type of leader? And the question, if when you reflect namhlanje, when you go home, ask yourself this question: what can I do? Okay, what can I change that's inside of me to become that embodiment of my people? Yesterday, I wrote a proposal to the institution about the crown, Payan, to say open trial up, because if someone asked the question, what exactly are we doing as the youth of today? So mine was open trial and allow students to participate in developing a business. Don't give them a handout. Give them a hand up instead of a hand out. Because not what we're looking for. We're not looking for hands out. We are done with that. So, in that process of us operating Payana, asifuna deponés, asifuna franchise, asifuna chisanya, izinto whereby we can get together, and get to know each other, to coexist, to bring Africanism inside the institution. That's what we want. But you will find, Okoti, even the people that we elect today, which Ukamani was talking about now, Okoti, we lack leadership because you find the people who are elected in position of power is always the loud people. And then you get surprised going up a class in and says, hey, Masaben so strike. It's being loud up a class in. Hey, and just pay. You placed him there. You placed him there. So let's go back to that very core of the question. What is a leader? Which I would like for you to reflect and ask on yourselves. And what type of leadership that I would like to produce. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Linda Gutle Sichaga. I'm a student here at NMU. I think my question or comment is based on, or to Sis Azania. I was very moved by what she said earlier, and it's also a way of trying to assist Onomngqushwana. I think, hopefully, they are listening. So I don't have a child yet, but if you remember when we were growing up, abazali bethu always used to ask us, but ufuna uba yintoni xa ukhula? And having us sitting in this gathering here today and looking at the rate, the highest rate, a challenge of unemployment in Mzansi. I don't know, I think it was in March now when I last checked the stats of unemployment, and it's 60%. If I go back now and check, anzazi bazawuthini, whether sinyukile okanye sehlile. So, is it still safe to say emntaneni okhulayo kula age, uba mntanam funda ube le nto ufuna uba yiyo. You can be whatever that you want to be. Having us sitting in this gathering, sixoxa the highest rate of unemployment. Sisithi, one of the reasons ezibekweyo apha include the education system that we have today. So is it still a safe space to tell abantwana bethu uba mntanam funda ube le nto ufuna uba yiyo? Whereas thina sitting here, they are graduates ezihleli apha ezingafumani imisebenzi, who were told by their parents uba you can be whatever that you want to be. So kulo inadequate opportunity of ufumana umsebenzi, is it still safe to say that to our children? And as again, whether you guys esikolweni now have people who are visiting to tell you that there is this crisis that we have in Mzansi. These are the causes. That is the other thing that I think we need to talk about. We need to talk about. Are these causes that esinikwa zona in the institutions of higher learning still serve the purpose or still relevant to what we have as a problem now in Mzansi? Usnefu did say here that EPA is still relevant. Are they all still relevant? Are they all still serving the purpose? Or should we now, Azania, speak of decolonization of the academic activity? Because we would be judged by the future generation if we're going to sit here and discuss these things. So we have these problems. What do we do? The education system that everyone is speaking about, the skills, is inadequate. So, bantwana besikolo, that was me trying to assist you, but when you leave today, think, because you did hear about there is a crisis, unemployment. Think about your future. You don't want to be one of those who are sitting at home after graduating. I'm not saying don't follow your passion, but also as parents, there are parents here. There are parents who should now really focus about umntanam indolane interest kuyo. Looking at the world. Indolane interest kuyo umntanam, is it gonna benefit or be helpful for him? If andenzi into mnamzali, when it leads to depression, mental issues, suicide, did I play a part? Was I closer to decisions that my child took? So, yeah, thanks.
Number 3.
Thank you very much, President. My name is Zukisa Sekoko. I'm from the Department of Political Studies and History. Now my reflection is on, unfortunately the speaker is no longer there, but Usinefu mentioned something about Fanon. I wanted to ask him, what is it that Fanon did that has not come to pass? Because I have read Fanon myself, and I believe that Fanon correctly articulate our history and our position as Africans, specifically in his book, The Wretched of the Earth, that the position we have taken, in fact, he makes this position not in retrospect, not having seen what happens in Africa. He makes this point in 1963, that Africans are bound to fail post-colonialism. He is making this point relating to nationalism. And I believe that our problems begin and end at nationalism. Every state in Africa that has failed has been led by a nationalist agenda. The nationalist agenda is the agenda that we should begin to question, which makes me agree with my sister in the front that the question of Africanism or Pan-Africanism is a question that we should focus on. As Pan-Africanists, we must dominate the agenda of uniting Africans, because we have seen nationalism fail everywhere in Africa, including South Africa, by the way. Nationalism has failed. The reason we have the problem of xenophobia today is because of nationalism. And the question of nationalism specifically focuses on empowering those who were born in this particular state and excluding those who were born in this particular state, which is outside South Africa, in the context of South Africa. But do we address our problems if we focus on certain nationalities? No, our problems remain the same. We ought to address our problems beyond nationalism. Where were you born? That must be the last question we ask. We must, as Africans, answer our questions by saying that us as Africans, and that takes us to a position that we must question our leaders, because you can't have Mswati killing people in Swaziland. You can't have Emerson Mnangagwa killing people in Zimbabwe. And Cyril Ramaphosa supporting these regimes, providing everything in these regimes. And when you have Zimbabweans, when you have Swatis in South Africa, you start to say, why are you here? It's your leader who's empowering these regimes in Africa. South Africa is a very powerful nation in Africa. If we have issues in South Africa, rest assured it's because of South Africa. If we address these issues, we will not have any problems in South Africa. I am therefore saying that, excuse Fanon, because he is correct to say that the national bourgeois or the national elite that emerges at independence is bound to fail because it is not empowered economically. They are not economically elite. They don't have the power. So when they are confronted by a well-resourced national elite that is sponsored by white monopoly capital in CODESA, they are bound to compromise. It's not Mandela. Even if it was Malema, they were going to submit and allow the national elite to keep the land. Why? Because they were not illiterate economically. They didn't have the power. Thank you, President.
All right, thank you everyone for your questions. And I only noted 3 hands for this round. So I'm so sorry. I only noted 3. I looked for your hand. I only noted 3. I'm so sorry. I'm going to start with our discussants and give over to you at this time to make your closing remarks. And not only make your closing remarks, but to give your comments on some of the questions and the concerns that have been raised here today. Let's go, Asamengelain, athlete.
Thank you so much. I would just like to piggyback off what our previous speaker had said. After my presentation, I was quite saddened when I didn't hear anything coming back from us in terms of the input that I made regarding this situation that we find ourselves as Africans. It is true. We tend to want to nationalize things. You'll see certain comments made by young people online. Oh, we fought for our freedom. We are fighting for our positions in South Africa. Why can't they do the same? We are taking back our power. Why can't they do the same? We are going to the streets. Why can't they do the same? It's their problem. They must deal with it. I was quite saddened before I made my way here this morning when I heard about the African convoy that has been sent to Ukraine to deal with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And I reflected, as a young person in Zimbabwe, specifically during the 2008 era, we had a massive hunger crisis. We had a devastating cholera outbreak. We had loss of lives because of political tension. And I never, not once, remember an African convoy landing on our borders to help us. I don't remember that particular incident. We have ongoing war in Ethiopia. I think it's been about 2 years now. Where do we speak about that in our spaces? Where do we see that on the news channel that says, donate to Ethiopia, relieve Congo? But we have all the adverts telling us to donate to Ukraine. With 1 bottle of water that you buy, $1 will be donated to the victims in Ukraine. We have victims within our own continent, but we're not worried about that. There's an us versus them mentality. I guess there's even the question of, why am I on this panel? Why am I here to discuss or to contribute on the issues of South Africa? And the reason why I'm here is because those issues are not South Africa's alone. As I said, I may not have been born here, but I consider South Africa my home. When I look at any of you, I don't see any difference between you and myself. I feel like we look the same. Everything that South Africa is going through at this moment, load shedding, cholera, water crisis, drought, we've had those same problems. So why then can I not take this seat to speak on that? I have a particular problem within this institution, for instance. We're regarded as international students. What is that? Why am I termed an international student when I come here? I think I pay 2 or 3 times the average student to be here. Yet my economical background is similar to yours. When I initially came here, the university did not take any part in integrating me into the South African culture. That was a stance that I took for myself. Why? Because I consider myself as one of you. So what I'm leaving to the young people now, our school goers now, I'm sure there are other African students within your school. Don't rush to point and say, oh, my friend, that person is just like you. Whatever pain that you feel, they feel the same pain. When we speak of South African issues, they're not South African issues. They are African issues. Africa has a leadership crisis, and that is why we are here, not because we are any different. Thank you.
I'm going to be quite short and just say, Luzuko had mentioned what are we committing to. And I don't have a solution per se, but I have something to add on to that. There is so much power in social and communal accountability. I don't know if we realize as just people in society how much power we have, because each and every single one of us, somewhere, somehow, at any point in our lives, we have that abantu bazothini thing in us. What are people going to say? Or what are people going to think? And this goes into just looking at the crime in our communities. We're not robbed or assaulted by abantu that don't stay with us. It's people that we see every day. It's people that we walk past, people that we know. Not know personally, but you know because you've seen this face. And I can say back in the day, there was a thing where if you did something as umtana that is from a certain family, your family is bound to know about it, because whoever saw you will be the first to go to your house, have a meeting with you and your family and say, Ubanban did this. I saw Ubanban smoking in that corner. So our problems were not just, oh, it's that family's issue. Whatever's happening in that family, the community was part of it as well. The community contributed into making sure that it doesn't stay that way. The community contributed into making sure people in that space grow and unlearn whatever habits they were picking up from whatever social groups they find themselves in. So I want to say that it starts with us. It starts with us in our communities. It starts with us, I don't know, having some sort of communal crime fighting don. To have people stand and say, because if I were to put myself in the shoes of someone that robs or whatever, there's shame in knowing, I know this person that I just robbed. There's shame in knowing that I just robbed this person and someone there that I know saw me. Because I can't go back to that person and be friends with them. I can't go back and want to be in a space with that people and feel safe, because I know what I have done and I know that someone that knows me saw it. So it's just be an eye for everyone, be a voice for those around you. It's not just about you, because it might not affect you now, but in some way it will or it does. Thank you.
Okay, mandithethe thuba ndiphinde ndibulele. Impendulo yam ijolise kuwe nobudoda. But apho ndizoqala khona to answer your question of education, because it's quite relevant. It's a relevant question. Let me get back to it. But basically, bubuza uba is it safe for us to uba si-interest abantwana uba they can make a decision right in terms of choosing a career, and what does that low career I choose, what does it give back to our state? Does it answer the question of unemployment at this time in state? The courses, academia yetu, does it respond to the times that we live in? Yabo. So apho ke ndizoqala khona ndizoqala ngesitsho sesiXhosa esithi okanye ndithi liqhalo mhlambi elithi inkomo yenqoma yintsengibheka. Intsingiselo yayo ithi inkomo ithi ibhekisele kwinto engeyo yakho usazi nolindele ukuba iphuthunywe ngumnikazi wayo ngenye imini. Into enzama ukuyitsho ke okanye mhlambi ndizama ukuthi intaka yakha ngoboya benye. Apho ndibhekise khona okanye apho ndijolise khona ukuba ayikho into yokuba sithi into esiyenzayo uyenzela wena siqu sakho kuphela. Hence ndithi bana your question is relevant because yes, I want to be in media mhlambi, but how does that serve my community? Ndibuyele ke ndiye kwinto yemfundo. So what I'm saying is, I believe that education indeed is a tool to build the nation. Wonke umuntu must be equipped with a skill. Apho iskill sakho xa sidibane nesam, sidibane nesomnye sikwazi ukwakha into esinokwazi ukuyikhomba. EsiXhoseni, because I'm someone that studies ihlobo kwenziwa ngalo esiXhoseni. Imfundo ayiphelelanga ekubeni ufunde ujonge omnye umuntu. Kodwa iqala ngokuba ipheculule the family structure. Umzekelo. What role do I play in the family? That is still education. Education that we have now, it's very vague. Education esinayo ayingeni kuwo wonke amasolotya society. You understand? And it leaves out a lot of questions esisijongane nazo ngoku. Yabo. So when we start with the family structure, uba wena ungumama, wena ungutata, and mna ndingumntana, what role do you play? What do you have to put in? Iyaqala ke ngoku imfundo. Siye question of infrastructure uba njengoba ke ngoku silolu sapho ne sizawuhlala phi. Then that means ke ngoku imfundo ke ngoku funeke siphinde siyinyuse siyi-elevate to a place where sithi ba we answer questions of infrastructure. What type of infrastructure do you want? Then ke ngoku imfundo yethu respond to that. You understand? And then ke ngoku siye kwi issue of okanye imfundo ijolise kwindalo. Because we need to siphinde sikhumbule uba singabantu abanjani. And ke ngoku when we remember ubudlelwane bethu nendalo, then comes the question of sustainability. Ubana imfundo yethu isijongile na into yobana are we sustaining the very land that we live on? In terms of agriculture, sitya ntoni ngalo mhlaba lo sihlala kuwo. So we need to uba imfundo yethu ijonge nezo relationships zinjalo. Ingabi imfundo, hence I said ngoku bendiqala kuba imfundo yethu esisuka kuyo, it answers mhlambi questions of the industrial revolution in terms of machinery and all of that. Funeke ufunde unqaye and then uphendule lo machine ba usebenza njani. But awujongi ungene kumasolotya e-society. Ndiphinde ndithethe ngenkcubeko. The respondent, Kamani, yes, he spoke about, I'm coming to the point of decolonizing academia. He spoke about the uniformity of language and culture, and I wanted to differ on that. Because in Nkcubeko, ayipheleli ekubeni you are expressing your culture, but it is who you are. And it's also a question of spirituality. And spirituality is not religion. Spirituality is being. So when you say to someone, Bana, kupa language, susa language yako, basically you're killing who they are. And we can never build when kukona indawo in our societies that are expressed, that are suppressed, I mean. So into endizama ukuyithetha ukubana those are the type of questions okanye zezo zinto kufuneka sizijonge in terms of education ba yintoni esiyidingayo ngoku in our society, and then ke ngoku education yethu responda njani to those needs. Inkosi.
Thank you very much as well. I'd like to say thank you very much for the invite to the Director of Conduct as well. I'd like to thank the speaker once more again. and the respondent as well for building the blocks for this discourse and this robust engagement as well. In my closing remarks, I'll gather everything that was said in the room and I'll just give a final remark as to how do we move forward as young people as well. But in opening, so I want to just share a little, it's a poem, but it's a very quick one by Martin Naimola, who was a pastor during the Nazi era, and during the time he was a prisoner because he decided to go against Adolf Hitler. In his poem, he says, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was a socialist, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, but there was no one to speak out." This poem, it looks at the discourse that we're having as to, there was a lady there that was saying, why do I have to come out and strike when others are striking for NSFAS when I know I won't get NSFAS? It's not about your individual self, but it's about the engagement and the fight for everyone as well as a unit. It's not about when not having the NSFAS itself, but it's about the next person, their discourse, their fight as well. In furthering my closing remark is to say, how arrogant are we as young people to think that we have time? Currently, the country itself is in a downward trajectory, and it's dying down and decaying in the hands of the current government that we have. We do not have time for that Kodesa, unfortunately. Now is the time for us, because we've been given the democratic right to vote and change things that don't work as well. Then we can go into the Kodesas and the discussions as young people in trying to move forward as well. We don't have time. The grid, ESCOM grid, might collapse at any point in time, and it will take a minimum of 2 weeks to whatever to get it up and running again. But what does that mean if the grid collapses itself? We'll become a cash state, there'll be looting, crime, black on black crime, white on white crime, whatever crime, but there'll be a huge amount of crime as well while that grid has collapsed. We do not have time as young people, even old people as well. We need to ensure that we register to vote, as the speaker was saying. We don't, you don't say who you must vote for, but we need to be conscientized as well and be aware of what's currently happening within the country and what steps we need to take. I also spoke about these conversations that we need to have as well. I'll accept that challenge as well when I come on to say that these things happen more oftenly as well. I'll keep it that short as well, and I thank you very much.
I would like to, first and foremost, to say thank you to Professor Mngomezulu and his team for the invite. It was an honor and a privilege. And then I would move to say that we must, I for one, I must say, as a young person, I'm also to blame for the downgrading of how our country is. It is no use pointing fingers and saying that our leaders are doing this, whereby some of us are within political parties and we are so scared to voice out and say that this is wrong. There was $1 billion across provinces when they were making speeches that that is allocated for young people. But Abandabasha are only mattered only on political paper. But physically, but yet we say to those people and say that honorable, comrade, leadership, But where does this leadership goes to when we have to make sure that these people account? There are families and there are young people who are suffering out there, who don't even know where they will go to in terms of academical. But to comrade banbani siyayidla imali kodwa sisho lutho. That's how wrong we are as young people. Then I would move on to say that, lastly, let's be champions of a free crime society, whereby as men, we flush away the tendency or the elements of being seen as monsters and gatekeepers, of blocking some of our sisters, and other females in particular, of reaching their goals, of succeeding well academically. But we are there to make sure that they reach a goal that they never intended, of reaching heaven before their time. That is so wrong of us. We need from now on to implement programs, intensive programs, making sure that residents and institutions of learnings are a place of safety and are a place of really academic process, rather than a place of making sure of GPV and murdering our sisters and making them reach the goal that they never intended. Just imagine that you, as a male, you have a girl child. At the age when they reach university, you never see them again, just because of a monster, a person who doesn't know how to control their anger, making them go to heaven before their time. Just, I'll leave a question with you as I depart this podium, that how about maybe you take a stand today and say that umjolo I have varsity, but after varsity, so that no, so that to make sure that our sisters reach their goal of succeeding academically, not dying at an early stage. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you everyone, and once again, thank you to Conrad, as led by you, Prof, and your team for such a wonderful opportunity. More than anything, I have learned so much, not only from the panelists and the speakers and from the people who were engaging from this program. It shows indeed that if each and every young person in this room can be given a mic, a lot can come out in identifying our problems. But before I speak, I first have to, of course, be guilty as charged again, Comrade Snifu, for being a problem as a young person in this country. Yes, I am guilty. I am part of those who are a crisis, and I will work very hard to make sure that I make a contribution in making sure that the next generation at least have a better live, a better place to live when it's their time. Well, I will start with what my grandmother used to say to me, may her soul rest in peace, continuously. She used to say to me, you know, whenever I complain, she would say, you can never see yourself over the hill unless you climb. Wishful thinking alone will not take you to where you want to be. You must climb. We've identified all these problems. Yeah. And a lot can be said. Trust me, there's a lot. We just mentioned a drop in an ocean when it comes to youth challenges. But I challenge you, all of you, each and every one of you, including myself, that in order for all these social ills that we're facing, for them to be eradicated, the first step must be taken by us. We must climb and make sure that we get to the other side. Otherwise, if we don't, nothing will change. I will close with a quote, because I saw a lot of people were quoting today. I must also quote. Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister, he once said, now it is not the end. Now it is not even the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning. Well, from now on, moving forward, us as young people, we have a big task ahead of us to make sure we go back to our rooms and go back to our societies to make sure that we advance the social change that we want to see. Otherwise, talking alone, meeting and gathering, it won't change anything. But making sure that we foster and advance the changes that we want to see is the only thing that will bring change. Otherwise, thank you so much. Such an opportunity must not only be limited, it must always continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Reluctantly, I'm going to hand over to our speakers and ask them to just keep their closing remarks as very short. Very short. Usam says, "Maqale ngawo."
Well, either by the barrel or by the bullet, by the Bible or by the gun, any which way freedom must come. Freedom will not come until we take a decision to say that we are pursuing a struggle and we are not relenting in that struggle. Let me thank the director of Conrad wholeheartedly and the staff personnel. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to come back to Conrad, not only as an employee, but also as a discussant in this matter. And I wish Conrad very well in its endeavors to pursue the struggle against non-racialism, the struggle against racialism, the advancement of non-racialism, and the pursuit of democracy. This institution faced challenges as to why of also being closed. I stand as a testimony of those people who said that you can't close Conrad. Not only because we are launching books, but Conrad is also a think tank contributing within the research profile of the institution. And long live to Conrad. Aluta, continue. Also to the young people that are here, particularly those below the ages of 18, as defined in the Constitution. Your role is also time-based. You will not permanently be under 18. You are going to grow. And when you grow, you will be guilty as charged as well. So whatever you do within the ambit of that definition must also be in line with the national agenda I proposed earlier on. Coming to the discussion for today, I think the challenge that we have is that is time and space. We are limited, and really we would want this conversation to continue. I hope, Nhlakanipho, that there is a social media profile of Conrad also where this discussion will continue. And in the comment section, I'm not on Facebook, but I will endeavor to have a Facebook for this month just to continue the conversation. It is a healthy conversation. We must have it, and no one can stop us. Coming to the discussants who discussed this president as you have led the charge, you must take it very serious, President, that this institution is by definition or by its vision, an African dynamic university. But all indicators do not indicate that it's an African university. It's named after Nelson Mandela, but all indications and operations do not embody Nelson Mandela. It's an indictment on you as the incumbent. And all those who participate, I heard that there are sub-wardens, RSAs, crime activists, education activists who are part of the panel, and also lawyers. You must take it upon yourself that you will take the charge. I will not respond to anything, but I say that the CODESA, you must not wait for Kwezi or Kamani to call it. The CODESA must start in the corridors at school. It must start in the factory floor at work. It must start in the streets in the community. It must start also at Kubana, at Freedom, Konka, Finesse. We must have that CODESA. That CODESA will not have a venue. It will not have a time. It will not have a date. It begins now. It's a conversation that we must have, and it's a consensus that we must all own as young people. It's high time that you do not wait for seminars. You do not wait for talks. You do not wait for formal gatherings. You start it, as Sam has said, the government is you. There's no President Ramaphosa who's going to convene it for us. It's ours. Let's own it. And the freedom will not come until we start and wage the war against all the challenges that we face. And we are the solution. And the time is now. Thank you very much.
Dango. First, thanks, Director, again for having me. By the way, Director, now as E-Youth, we have a mandate for you with respect to KenRed. Has it left? Colleagues will pass on the message. But Q and I have come a long way, even with respect to the entity of KenRed itself. Change is not, I don't want to quote, some people are even quoting colonizers, but I don't want to open up that debate. But I'll say, that one of Churchill, okay. But I just want to say that change is not, it's not an event. And number two, it's not easy. It comes with great sacrifice, both by individuals, but also by Tina as a collective of young people. There is a lot of work to be done. Even when we talk about xenophobia and Afrophobia and black-on-black violence and so on, violence perpetuated by men against women. By the way, as a side note, I want to say, Sakile, we are mandating you here to go to men's conference and talk there to get the narrative right. Because when I go on Twitter and I see some of the proposed topics for discussion, they don't do women and girl children any justice. And I want to commend you, not because I want you to have some form of hero status. We must be careful as allies. I know as a white activist trying my best to fight racism when and where I can, that sometimes we fall into that trap. And I'm not saying you are, but I do also want to at the same time commend you and say, I have never, and I'm heading towards youth and dial. I'm not old yet, but I'm still not 21. So I've been a youth activist for a while. And I'm even emotional about this. I've never, during Roads Must Fall, Fees Must Fall, an activist in communities, I've never met such an honest young man when it comes to the issues of patriarchy, GBV, sexism, sex for jobs, everything that women, in particular black women, are subjected to every day. So I just want to commend you on that. And you were consistent. You were consistent. You spoke about it in your first inputs. You spoke about it on your second round, you know. And it's critical because we need allies. We can't do it. We're not saying lead the task. For us women, we are more than capable of challenging it ourselves. But we need allies because men, you are in positions of power in comparison to women. So Ndiabulela, please go to men's conference and deal with Chris XL for us. The tasks of many young people, we we live in a neoliberal capitalist society. And capital is all about competition for resources. It is about the individual. It is not about the community. It's why we see, I mean, even today, Adelaide, and I also want to just appeal to Kenred to maybe looking at having a series around issues of Afrophobia and xenophobia specifically. But it's even why we are having, sadly, we are having discussions now around, and you'll hear Premier Lesu Fipanyaza, for example, in Gauteng talk about, we must create a grant specifically for South African spaza shop owners, because these people are taking over townships and the township economy. And I hear you, it is an incredibly problematic discourse, but it comes down to the fact that we are competing for resources. And I think what I'm trying to get at here, young people, is it is not just about voting next year. If we must mobilize and vote, we must ask ourselves, are we, and someone spoke about it, what are the type of leaders? I think it was Butando from Forte. By the way, Tando, Funando NMU, go back to Forte and fix issues, please. But once we go to ballot box and we vote, we must ask ourselves, when we occupy those positions of power as young people, do we have the ethical capacity, the courage, etc., to challenge the system? Because my Pan-Africanist brother, I was listening to everyone very carefully, spoke about how our politicians are sponsored. And it is true across the board. Behind our politicians, their power is quite limited, by the way. Behind our politicians is capital, it's resource, right? And it therefore means it informs and shapes the mandate of even government, by the way. So Tina, we must ask ourselves that should when you become umongameli tomorrow, and you be offered the so many dollars to put under ibed yakho, are you willing? Are you willing? Are you willing to say no? I'm okay. I'm asking a tough question, sorry, man. You know, I'm concluding, Sisintla, but these are the critical questions we have to ask. If I have been born into a family, for example, and I want to touch on a little bit to just indulge me, everyone. But Q spoke about clever white people and then the dumb ones and, you know, and the middle center ones. You know, white boys, but Q in particular, many of them do not go to varsity. What they discuss with their fathers, I'm gendering it as well. We can talk about white privilege, I have it, but there's the gender disparity as well. What do those white boys in grade 9, 10 are discussing with their families is not which subject to study, is not which university to go to. Yes, there are those that go, but they're talking about, how do I take over the family business? Ne? What am I going to inherit when you die? All of those things. Which means there's been a foundation laid around, number one, networks built and kept within the white community. And number two, how that wealth will be distributed, will be there and distributed down the line. Now, as an ally, okay, I'm just an ally, that is a conversation young people of color in particular must be having. That when you get to that position of power, don't be like current leadership and say, it's my time to eat now. We want bonke abantu to eat. the same way that privileged folk are currently positioned historically and contextually to eat. And that's my closing remark, is just to say, as young people, I completely agree with Uput Q. Colleagues, e-revolution, it takes place in all spaces of society. When you are in the church and there's a pastor telling people to drink e-petrol because the miracle of Jesus is on its way, there's a leadership crisis there. Ne? When you are in a community hall and the counselor is saying, I've got jobs available, but, I won't go into the buts. There's a leadership crisis. When we are in a university that still refers to fellow African brothers and sisters as international students, that is a leadership question, by the way. It's not even a technical, academic, it's a leadership question. We must be asking the leaders on the top floors, how have they not identified that as problematic? So leadership, change, revolution from us as young people, it must happen in all stratas of society, on the sports field. By the way, even in the tavern, some of the most interesting political conversations take place. I'll leave it at that. All the best, young people. Siyakuba. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to hand over the program to Usis Anele, who's going to do our vote of thanks. Before I do so, please note that outside there are refreshments that have been prepared for you. Umvuzo ufikile, siyabulela ngokusilinda. Another thing, the SRC president has asked that I announce that there is a political dialogue at the Kraal, if I'm not mistaken. So if leaders have time after this, please do pop into the Kraal. And lastly, can all of the speakers, discussants, Wongumuntu who was in the program, please stay behind in the venue, and then we will sort ourselves out after that. All right, thank you so much.
Comrades, friends, and colleagues, we have come to the end of our program. Thank you so much for your patience. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers, CANRED, in collaboration with the Mandela International Office, the Department of History and Political Science, the Development Studies Student Society. I would also like to thank our speaker and respondent, Usamantha Nokamani. Uvuyo has tokens of appreciation that you can just quickly help me with. Take two. Okay, well, they would also like to thank our student panel, as well as the sound and the audience, whom of course this wouldn't have been a success without. And yeah, enjoy the long weekend and be safe.